Welcome to the second edition of the Voluntary Local and Voluntary Subnational Review Days. This is Martino Miraglia and from SDG Localization and Local Governments team, and I'll have the honor to be your master of ceremony today. The VLR VSR Days are an initiative of UN Habitat, UCLG, and UNDESA, and for this specific session, we have also the pleasure to have all the regional commissions on our side for the organization of this session. Today's session is going to be on multi-level governance and a connection between the different levels of reporting. But before that, we are going to have a pleasure to have few representatives from our co-organizing institutions opening officially these online sessions and meetings of the VLR VSR Days. We are coming from the first week of HLPF, where we were in person launching the VLR VSR Days last Thursday in New York, and this is the continuation of that launching, and for 2 days of online discussions about the technical and the political potential of the VLRs and VSRs and their connection with the national reporting. Next to me, I have Anna Calvete, and she will give us and walk us through the technical details of this meeting before we open the session to our speakers. Anna, over to you.
Thanks, Martino, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Buenos días, buenas tardes a todas las personas que nos acompañan hoy. Bonjour, bon après-midi, bonsoir à toutes les personnes qui nous accompagnent aujourd'hui. Before we go any further, let me remind you that we have interpretation in English, French, and Spanish, which is at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Tenemos interpretación en inglés, francés y castellano que encontraréis en el panel de abajo de Zoom. Et nous avons un service d'interprétation disponible que vous trouverez dans le panneau inférieur de l'écran. And we invite you to, when you speak, kindly use proper headphones and microphones so that the participants and interpreters can hear you more clearly and we can all have a better experience. Also, just a quick reminder that this session is going to be recorded. So welcome everyone again. My name is Ana Calvete Moreno. I am a member of UCLG World Secretariat, the Gold or Research Team in particular. And it is my pleasure to introduce you together with my colleague from UN Habitat, Martino Miraglia, to these online sessions of the 2023 VLR VSR Days, which are co-organized by UCLG, UN Habitat, and UNDESA. As Martino was saying, the days were launched last week during the Allergy Day at the High Level Political Forum in New York. It was a complete success, in our opinion, with wonderful exchanges, encouraging ways forward. And we know that for the achievement of the SDGs, we have to be all together. So this is why, as Martino was saying, these VLR VSR Days are continuing today. Today and tomorrow, we will have 4 online thematic sessions, which we hope will help build the case around the importance of SDG reporting from the bottom up. We will start now with a session on multi-level governance and the connection between VLRs, VSRs, and VNRs. At 3:15 CEST Barcelona time, we will have a dedicated session on voluntary subnational reviews, which we hope you will also attend. Tomorrow, the first meeting starting at 1:30 CEST Barcelona time will focus on strengthening data collection and analysis and monitoring systems in the framework of VLR and VSR processes. And at 3:15, this will be followed by a session on stakeholder engagement and social inclusion and justice, together with the closing of the 2023 VLR VSR Days. We hope to have a great and forward-looking exchanges with all of you. And without further ado, I give back the floor to my colleague Martino, who will lead us through the first thematic session on multi-level governance. Martino, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Anna, again, and welcome everyone. I see a lot of people connected. This is great. I will just say that really we are talking about multi-level governance today, and specifically enhancement of multi-level governance through connecting SDG reporting. And just to say that last week at HLPF, and this will go on also during this week, localization and local governments were the start of the scene. We have seen more and more multi-level member states focusing on the issue of SDG localization, many local and regional governments being part of national delegations, discussions around the VNRs integrating VLRs and VSRs, and of course, under the leadership of UCLG, a whole focus dedicated to local governments during the local governments and local and regional governments day last Thursday. I will give the floor to the opening speakers, starting with Emilia Seitz, Secretary General of UCLG, for introductory word, and continuing then to the other colleagues that will welcome us today to the opening of these VLR VSR Days. Emilia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Martina. Thank you, Anna, the whole UCLG and UN Habitat team for making this possible, but of course to all of the partners. I do share with you, just arriving this weekend from the high-level political forum and back in the office, I am starting to process what has been happening, and I very much align with the assessment that there is something that is changing, and that localization is getting a differentiated and significant space in the discussions. It is also the case in the political vision towards the summit. We see localization and references to voluntary local reviews, but also to voluntary subnational reviews in the texts that are being discussed. And this is a very important step forward, something to celebrate. It has also been, last week, we have seen an unprecedented number of special sessions and side events dedicated to localization. And I know that sometimes we might feel it's a lot of blah, 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 and then where is the real recognition coming and where are the investments coming? But it is important for us, for this community of local practitioners to acknowledge what is happening, and to also realize that we might be already in the next level as community, and that member states and the international system itself are only now starting to understand the potential of what we are doing. And I think it is important for us now to be very organized, very pragmatic about what do we want to promote. And this is the kind of question that we need to be asking ourselves when we talk about the new relationships with other spheres of governments that the experiences of localization are triggering, but also when we think about repeating voluntary local reviews or the scope of the voluntary subnational reviews. This is a moment to be very pragmatic and to ensure that you have clear asks to national governments and to the international community, because we have the attention of this ecosystem, and it is our responsibility to ensure that we use that for transformation. Our case, the case that we have been trying to make as organized constituency of local and regional governments in New York under the realm of the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments, is we need the kind of transformative policies that are only possible if all of government and all of society are behind. And doing the same kind of things that we did is no longer possible, because the connections between SDGs are asking us to approach things in a different manner, to give priority to different enablers. And we are seeing now that the kind of different results that we need to get are very much linked with giving priority to certain things. And which are those things? Well, those things are the path to equality. Equality needs to be very high up in the priorities, and that means financing and prioritizing different type of services that put care at the center. We need to consider the commons, the common goods, the common resources from a public use perspective. And considering that entails that matters such as housing, for instance, need to have a very different place in what we do. Accessibility for everyone, everywhere, is the next game changer in the work that we are going to do. And access to finance is no longer enough, but it is the quality of the finance. What do we finance with it? That will be the big question. And I think we are further in this thinking that the national governments might be in some cases. And it will be important for us to think now about what that means for those relationships with the other spheres of government. Considering, for instance, that there might need to be country-wide mechanisms to consider the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, to hold them under evaluation, but also to propose transformational policies is one of these critical outcomes that we are looking for, which will also need to impact the way that the international community is valuing or examining or evaluating the achievement of the SDGs and how far we are. So I will stop with these comments because I know you have a lot to share, and this is why we are here together. But I want to leave you with the thought that I have shared repeatedly last week, and that I think that this group will understand better than any other group, and that is, we have a very big responsibility because the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs can be in peril if we don't all stand together and if they are politicized. It is a big responsibility that we have to keep this as priority in the agenda, as a universal commitment that does not define political ideologies, but defines policy priorities together, and is universal and is common. And that is responsibility that I feel local governments, local and regional governments carry as no other, and in particular, these champion groups of practitioners that stands behind the voluntary local reviews. The international community is starting to understand that. The responsibility is with us, working together with them. Keep doing the good job that you do, and thank you very much for your commitment. Back to you, Martin.
Thanks a lot, Emilia, and thank you for that call for being practical and the necessity to switch from politics to policies and making sure that the SDGs, as we are witnessing around the globe, are not politicized for the good or for the bad, depending on the perspective. And being very practical, I think that we have in our hands also a couple of instruments for us to advance on this positioning. The VLR policy brief that we have been leading and presenting initially, the HLPF, can be one of those instruments for us to be practically suggesting what we want ahead, specifically to the focus on VLRs. And I'm sure that many of us remember we have released the VLR communique back in 2021 during the first edition of these VLR VSR Days, and we hope to take a bit of the outcome of this discussion and we look at that document and update it also in line to what you were mentioning, Emilia, equality, financing, and the look at the commons and how do we bring this together under the SDG reporting, planning, and policies. I will then thank you, Emilia. Thank you again. I will then give the floor to Srinivasa Popuri, Chief of the Bangkok Program Office from UN Habitat, for his welcoming remarks. Sri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martino. Honorable mayors, representative of local and regional governments, esteemed partners, my colleagues, and friends and ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of my executive director and on behalf of UN Habitat, I extend a very warm welcome for these online sessions of the second edition of the VLR and VSR Days. Just last week, many of us witnessed the in-person launch of during the HLPF, which was quite a resounding success. And this accomplishment was made possible by collective efforts, as Emilia mentioned. And I extend my deepest gratitude for all your invaluable contributions. And of course, it goes to many of our partners. But let me take a moment to express my sincere appreciation to the co-organizers of the event, mainly UCLG, and of course UNDISA, and all our regional economic commissions of the UN, be it UNESCAP, UNECA, UNICE, ESCWA, and UNECLAC. UN Habitat is very glad to collaborate with all of you as long-standing partners, and that our ongoing work on SDG localization would not be possible without you all. And colleagues, it is very clear that achieving SDGs relies heavily on the presence of robust multi-level governance systems, wherein the voluntary, local, and subnational reviews play a very pivotal role. And we are seeing that in every region, be it in developed and also in developing countries. And the connection between these three Vs, the VLRs, the VNRs, and the VSRs, has fostered an unprecedented dialogue across all spheres of the government. And this is leading to a very increased awareness among the national governments about the localization process. And we are also witnessing greater alignment of local administrative setups with national frameworks. So we have several examples, but let me quote few examples. We have seen in Greater Amman municipality in Accra, for example, they have substantially strengthened the dialogue and the coordination with their respective national governments, and thanks to VLR process. And the city of Buenos Aires, it has undergone an extensive internal transformation to align those plans and programs to its departments, to the requirements on and objectives of the 2030 agenda. And we have also seen in Finland, they have established a very strong connection between the VLRs and VNRs, using as a complementary process for monitoring and advancing sustainable development. And the government has actively encouraged both the regional and the local governments to engage VLRs, recognizing the valuable insights they bring to the national review process. So, and coming from Asia Pacific region, a good example is represented by the Philippines, where national government requested all the government levels at all levels of the government to implement the national development plan that is aligned with the SDGs, providing support to the subnational and the local processes and the workshops to ensure alignment and coordination of indicators from the national to the local level. So in light of those and other reasons, member states have placed VLRs and multi-level governance, including the integration of the national reporting at the forefront of the resolution on SDG localization. So which was recently endorsed during the second session of the UN Habitat Assembly, which we all have witnessed. Dear friends, despite notable progress made in strengthening the VNR and VLR connection, in promoting that multi-level governance, we had to accept and recognize that much remains to be done and several challenges ahead. So I can bring a direct experience from the Asia Pacific region. The national efforts to align the policies and the plans to the SDGs should be followed by an adequate redistribution of responsibilities and resources, more importantly, the resources at subnational level. which happens on an ad hoc basis in most of the countries. The subnational governments need also to be supported in understanding the impact of SDG localization and the VLRs as a tool to improve future plans and the future expansion of the cities, so that they can cater to the constituents of that city. The participatory and inclusive processes need to be strengthened at all levels. And finally, this is very important for developing countries, that a lesson we learned from Asia Pacific region is whoever is supporting the governments, we must ensure that its ownership lies with them, or else many of these reports will be reports and nice books in the shelves eating dust. We have seen that, and we have experienced that, and this is something that we really have to ensure the ownership lies at all levels of the government, not with any external entities or NGOs or civil society or the UN agencies. And UN Habitat is very committed in collaborating that mission with the UNDISA, UN regional commissions, UCLG, and other partners to fortify this multi-level governance ecosystems for localization of SDGs. We must persist that in our endeavors, enhance our joint efforts, and continue advancing together. In 2022, in partnership with the BMZ and UAZ, and with the support of ARCO Research Center, UCLG, the Brookings Institution, and the London School of Economics, we have established and launched the first global research and platform on multi-level governance for SDG localization. So together with UNDISA, UCLG, and other regional economic commissions, we are now working very closely with all these entities in 13 countries in supporting those member states and the cities for the VLRs. And we are placing the multi-level governance approach at the center of our cooperation with the partner cities and the countries. So lastly, colleagues, it is worth noting that UN Habitat serves as a permanent co-chair of the Local 2030 Coalition, the UN-wide initiative for localizing SDGs. And we are actively working to place the multi-level governance at the heart of the discussions on the localization. Dear colleagues, partnerships should be the core of our pursuit towards sustainable development. So let's continue working together, enhancing our efforts, and jointly overcoming those challenges that I have cited before. Without further ado, I would like to hand over the rest of the speakers and inaugurate the online sessions of the second edition of VLR and VSR Days. Thank you. Thank you all. Over to you, Martino.
Thanks a lot, Sri. Thank you very much. And just underlining the importance of what you have mentioned, the SDG localization resolution just recently approved at the UN Habitat Assembly that really places VLRs and explicitly refers to the connection with VSRs and VNRs as a key feature for member states and partners to advance towards SDG localization, a milestone for this group and this community, really, after all of these years of work. I'm passing the floor to the third speaker, Jürgen Gafke, Senior Program Management Officer at UNDESA, that has been leading work on VLR for quite some time. And Jürgen, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Martino. And everyone, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to every one of you. And I'm, on behalf of DESA, we are very honored to be part and having been a co-organizer of this event and meet such important partners. I mean, we have been working in the last years with Habitat, UCLG, and not to mention the UN country teams to advance localization of SDGs. I'm happy to see that we have such a wide list of speakers coming from national governments, regional governments, departments, and as well as municipalities. Dear colleagues, in the SDG report, the UN Secretary General has called on world leaders to deliver a rescue plan for people and planet, to generate fresh ambition and transformative actions for the breakthroughs that we need to bring the 2030 agenda back on track. This year's HLPF is an important step to highlight new approaches to advance the SDGs, and what we hope will lead to an SDG summit this fall to be a turning point for our common work. As Amelia mentioned, it's important to know what are we choosing to promote, which actions are really transformative. Now, there has been a growing recognition of the central role of local and regional governments in our collective efforts to achieve the 2030 agenda. Local governments are at the center of providing essential services to its citizens and to ensure that these services reach everyone and that no one and no place is left behind. They are also closest to its people, and they know where we stand of achieving the SDGs. Voluntary local reviews provide a methodology to local governments to assess current status, design policy responsive, and monitor progress. The process provides a tool to listen and engage their citizens. VLRs have also been an important tool for increasing multi-level governance, and we see that more and more national governments are including VLR processes in their national reports. Because we at DESA believe in the power of VLRs to advance localization, DESA has supported local governments in the preparation of VLRs, offering policy recommendations, creating spaces for the exchange of experiences between local and national governments of different countries and regions, and offering opportunities for development of training of local actors interested in preparing a report. We have learned a lot from our partners on the challenges and benefits of going through this process. One thing to note, local and regional governments need support if you really want to make progress and advance the VLRs and the 2030 agenda at the local level. Challenges include breaking silos between different branches of government. As Amelia also mentioned, the SDGs requires a more holistic approach to look at problems, not a sectoral approach. Insufficient financial and human resources are a big challenge, particularly for local governments. And if you look at not the big cities, municipalities, areas, we also have supported more rural departments, smaller cities, and smaller governments who need support, particularly when it comes to getting the relevant data, and working together with national offices. National Statistical Office has been very helpful for them. So let me stress the important point. The partnerships created between local and national governments, civil society, academia, and the private sectors are crucial to advance this process. Cities and national government need to make efficient use of financial and human resources. Support by the national government to the cities in areas such as statistics and data, or linking municipal with national development plans, is a way to make optimal use of limited resources. Association of local governments can enable municipalities in the conduct of VLRs or in the contribution to VSRs. Leveraging on the work of local universities can support governments in assessing current status and identifying steps. Lastly, engaging the private sector early on in the process can bring the necessary financial support needed for infrastructure or other cost-intensive projects. These are just examples where we see challenges and areas, how we can overcome the challenges, particularly in the area of data, finance, human resources, and breaking silos. I'm looking forward to learn more from the experience from the speakers present today. And also in view of time, I'm closing now. Thank you from DESA for giving us the opportunity to be present here. Thank you. Back to you, Martino.
Thanks a lot, Jürgen, and thank you for DESA's leadership globally, really, not only on the VLR issue, but your leadership in bringing us forward and pushing for the local governments to be at the center of the discussion at HLPF in the past years has been central. We would have certainly not achieved what we have achieved without your constant support. And with these words, I'll pass the floor to our fourth and last speaker, Dimitri Mariasin, UNECE Deputy Executive Secretary. Dimitri, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to speak to you on behalf of all 5 UN regional commissions. And I'd like to start by thanking our great partners, UN Habitat, UN DESA, UCLG, and of course, all the regional commissions for the collaboration on this important event. The previous speakers already addressed the main point, the elephant in the room. And I'm still in New York, and the main realization of the HLPF's first week for me was indeed that, unfortunately, and sorry, don't quote me on this, especially I hope that colleagues in DESA understand me correctly. Unfortunately, we are not seeing that the VNRs deliver the promise. And it's nobody's fault, because the way it's set up, it is very hard to expect that once in a few years a national government would come and have a full picture of what's actually happening. So the significant gap in the picture globally that comes from the aggregation of VNRs and then comes from the regional progress reports or the global stock take, which we just saw, is a wake-up call to all of us. It means we need two things. We need a potential rethink of the data ecosystems and the accountability frameworks for SDG achievement as we enter the second half of the 15 years stretch. And secondly, we need to go local. And this is where granular level accountability frameworks for SDG achievement might actually work better. So this is the main political message as far as I'm personally seeing it. Secondly, it is very clear that working with local governments on linking how they plan and how they allocate resources to the Sustainable Development Goals has been a path on which we have been collectively walking together with all of you. We have learned a lot in the past few years, and we can say with confidence that more and more cities around the world have now been putting Sustainable Development Goals or related frameworks in the middle of their planning and budgeting. And for me, this is actually the most important thing, because ultimately it's not about reporting to a forum in New York. It is about to which extent the environmental, economic, and social dimensions of sustainable development are part of actual budget allocations by municipalities at all levels. Now, we see that having VLRs as a tool actually helps in this direction. And I think this is the most important point. Now, what could we do better to ensure it? Well, I believe we need to have a very clear policy recommendation element that actually matters for governments, that is actually responding to a need of a mayor. And we need to recognize that while we in the UN system are good at ensuring sharing experiences and creating blueprints, and by the way, I mean, we regional commissions produce the regional guidelines for voluntary local reviews, and we hope those are useful. We need to recognize that each city or each type of city as a very minimum needs a particular set of policy mixes, be it in water management or health and environment nexus or energy or transport, because the city's geographies, economies, social conditions differ, and so do their ability to access transfers, so public money and leverage private resources. So how do we reflect the notion of a policy mix, a unique policy mix that actually helps a city achieve the SDGs is what I think is, ahead of us still as homework as we enter the new generation of VLRs and VSRs. The second point, we need to recognize that cities are often the source of innovation. And as we reshape the means of implementation, so to say, in the UN bureaucratic language, the how of the SDGs, as the world is going to now, at the SDG summit, at the summit of the future, is going to try to figure out what to do with the unmet agenda, we need to turn to cities for examples of solutions, examples of SDG accelerators that we in the UN system do want to focus on in the next few years. So how can we ensure that VLRs are actually a source of that learning? Thirdly, SDGs have become an important benchmark, an important, galvanizing point almost for the private sector around the world. You come to any meeting of any executives, you come to a financial markets conference, you come to an industry conference, you would hear as a very minimum about ESG and certainly increasingly about the SDGs. Is the conversation happening enough between the private sector leaders at local level and especially in larger cities, right? In large municipalities, in large metropolitan areas, where there are significant efforts by the private sector, be it on community engagement efforts or broader efforts, or for example, on a line of work that we in UNECE call public-private partnerships that benefit the SDGs. It's a very concrete approach to ensuring that concessions and other PPPs are conducive to achieving the sustainable goals. So the link between the private sector and the cities is something we need to be looking at going forward too. Finally, if we look at this as a fixed framework, we'll be in trouble, because the past few years have shown that, be it with COVID or pandemic or the effects of the multiple conflicts around the world in our region, it's very visible with the effect of the war in Ukraine, but other conflicts are as profoundly affecting cities' resilience around the world. We need to understand what can we do to make, when we're developing our guidelines and studies and standards and provide technical assistance to cities on different aspects of urban life, including on the VLRs, are we helping cities to become agile and manage risk and manage uncertainty? Or are we actually getting them into a framework that is fixed and linear? And are we demanding too much from cities when we are coming up with requirements that are maybe too strict and not agile enough? So agility is extremely important. And linked to this, the realization that as much as it's useful to report on the past, you actually need, as very often now is being discussed, to learn from the emerging future. And I'd like to strongly advocate that we join forces in bringing strategic foresight and horizon scanning into the next generation of voluntary local reviews. And why not already today have a very strong attempt at imagining the cities we want to see in 2030, but I dare say also in 2050, with a net zero timeline, and also in line more or less with the timeline of UN Secretary General's Our Common Agenda. Managing from the emerging future, introducing strategic foresight to this conversation is, in our view, very important. And we invite all of you to join forces and start talking about the future of cities we want to see. Now, of course, we still need to make sure that in all that we have high quality data. And that's another important element. Several speakers mentioned data, capacity of cities to collect data and statistics. Without it, honestly, all this will be futile exercise, because we cannot be evidence-based without high quality data collection systems and data innovation, another important pillar of the UN 2.0. So how do we bring data innovation to VLRs and VSRs to their next generation? I must say we have started doing a lot of these things in partnership with all of you in the regional commissions. I'll give you one example from the Asia Pacific, where the Asia Pacific Mayors Academy, organized by UNESCAP in cooperation with UN Habitat and UCLG and other partners, has been engaging mayors, governors to participate in annual fellowships and helping them in capacity building and addressing some of these very pressing challenges. Ourselves at UNECE, we have launched an initiative you might have heard about, the Forum of Mayors, which has now become an institutionalized format of engagement for mayors and intergovernmental bodies, is a subsidiary body of our Housing, Urban Development and Land Management Committee. And we, by the way, look forward to welcoming all of you at the Forum of Mayors later this year in October in Geneva. So we're doing a lot. A lot still needs to be done. There is a realization that VLRs may end up one of the most useful things in terms of monitoring the progress in SDGs and advancing our action. We need a smart policy mix. We need, of course, mayors and other key stakeholders at the table when we're discussing this. And this event is a great example of how we, as the UN structures, can join forces, of how we can partner with the key drivers of this change, in this case, UCLG, and of course, how we can actually be listening to the mayors and other local authorities in this process. I thank you, and I wish this meeting a great success. Looking forward to hearing more about its outcomes.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Deputy Executive Secretary, for your words. Lots of insightful thoughts. I will collect one specifically, which is the way forward. How do we bring all of this together and transform reporting into something that is actionable, that is policy oriented for mayor and governments, and that these reports will not stay into shelves, as he was mentioning, but really advance and help our local and regional governments in their work, both in their territories as well as globally. And I think this is very much the spirit that we are all bringing into this VLR VSR Days as we look forward. I thank our opening guests for their remarks and welcoming words. We are now starting with the panels of the multi-level governance session and getting into the discussion with our guests from all over the world. I will pass the floor to the moderator of our first block, but first to say just thank you to the technical team that is behind the scenes and that is really putting us together in this amazing Zoom scene scenario that you are all here seeing today. Thanks a lot to the UCLG colleagues, to the UNHABITAT technical team. They are in Barcelona helping us and guiding us through this session today. I will leave it here and pass the floor to the regional director of the Office for Africa, Umar Silla, for the moderation of the first block. Over to you, Umar.
Thank you very much, Martino. You can hear me very well. Yeah. Thank you very much for putting together this very important panel on localization of SDGs. I know we don't have much time. We'll go straight forward to the subject matter, but just want to bring some point, raised by predecessor, intervention from Emilia and bringing the discussion from New York, and the need to have a new paradigm on the issue of, tracking the SDGs, reporting and mechanism. And I like this point of responsibility and solidarity, why it is important to look at the new paradigm. Of course, some people have talked about, the setback we are facing on the implementation of the SDGs. We know that with all those crises we are seeing, from health, environment, and even economic, social inequalities, there's a lot of delay in track, and achieving, our objective on the SDGs. And this will require new paradigm shift in the fact that, the importance of local action can no longer be overemphasizing, and that way we can make action and we can make a difference in accelerating the implementation of the SDGs. And this paradigm of all society approach and multi-stakeholder approach, multi-level approach is fundamental for us to get back, to the right track on this assessment of the implementation of the SDGs. A few questions you raised and few lessons as well you mentioned in your introduction is that VLR and VSR have been very relevant on promoting transparencies at the local level, accountability, ownership, but also at the same time influence at national level decision-making process. And that's why we have seen, this importance of this connection with this three level of reporting mechanism, and also leading to increased awareness among national government and greater alignment of local administration with national level. I think the issue of alignment is very fundamental and very important in terms of coordination, but also in terms of looking into duplication. But of course, this connection is not really smooth sometimes. We have seen a lot of conflict between sub-regional government, central government, and local government on the way that, we implement policy, we make a decision, and that's the reason why this discussion is very important. And when we look back, on what have been achieved, and what the challenge we have been facing on this connection between the three levels of reporting mechanism, I would like to reflect on the four questions during this session. One is, how can we ensure these connections being smooth? I think the smoothness is very important. Look into accountability, transparency, alignment, and coordination. And secondly, what are the mechanisms we need? Some people are talking about financing, some people are talking about private sector partnership, public sector partnership, which is very important to look at those mechanisms. They can help us, accelerate the implementation of the SDGs at the local, national, and sub-regional level. And also, we talk about the challenges. I don't want to, deep dive on the challenges because we all know the challenges we are facing when it comes to reporting today. Data aspect is one of it, policy implementation, one of it. But in terms of overlooking, what are the critical action that is needed for this acceleration of the implementation of the SDG and how we can surpass of all those challenges is very important. That's why I refer to this conversation back. And for this, panelists today, just give a solution and action-oriented, approach to the issue so that after this meeting, we'll be able to flag, different element, also relevant element to the resolution of New York, but also from programming from UNDESA, UN Habitat, and from UCLG. It's always good to reflect from you guys innovative ideas and how to accelerate and how to make it happen, this connection in a very smooth manner. So today we have a number of panelists. I mean, I'll be very sharp and very watching the time because we don't have much time. Every panelist will have 5 minutes. What is the issues? What is your solution? And what is the way forward to allow us to get, into a point where we can find, concrete action, to supporting this acceleration of the SDGs. Our first speakers will be Jose Pablo Cespedes. I hope I pronounce very well, your name is my Francophone accent. And Jose is a professional advisor and a mid-plan in Costa Rica. So I'll not go into the detail of the biography, which is quite rich, but what is important is the topic you're going to address today. And we'll have Marin Kidiraliva, Chief Specialist, International Cooperation and Protocol Department, Bishkek City Government in Kyrgyzstan. And we have Yves Zimmerman, who is the Director of the Agenda 2030 Project City and Metropolitan Area of Strasbourg in France. And lastly, we'll have Stella Sazita, President of Regional Administration and Local Government in Tanzania. So without further ado, I'll ask one question to Jose to kickstart, your intervention and to keep it very short in 5 minutes. The question is the following. Monitoring system and active participation of local communities and actors are vital for achieving sustainable development goals. How have you seen the connection of VNRs, VSR, and VLR contributing to strengthening monitoring system and ensuring engagement of local communities and actors in your work in Costa Rica? We talk about multi-stakeholders, multi-level action. So the floor is yours, Mr. Jose, to convince us in 5 minutes. Back to you.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna do a little presentation in English, in Spanish, sorry. So let me, okay, and next, please. Next. Bueno, primero que todo, un elemento importante es poder integrar los distintos niveles de gobernanza dentro del marco de ODS. En esa línea, Costa Rica ha logrado avanzar bastante a la hora de integrar a los distintos gobiernos locales y a las distintas instituciones que representan estos gobiernos dentro del marco de decisiones que se tiene en la implementación y promoción de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. En Costa Rica, como podemos ver, bueno, existe un alto nivel, un consejo de alto nivel, visto por los cuadros en rojo en la presente diapositiva, pero los gobiernos locales se encuentran integrados dentro de un comité asesor, ¿verdad?, el cual gestiona y brinda asesoramiento al poder de la República. En esa línea, un elemento importantísimo para poder integrar a los distintos niveles de gobernanza inicia desde un marco normativo sólido como es el que tiene Costa Rica, donde podemos comprender que se tiene un rol asesor para la toma de decisiones basadas en evidencia y basadas en el conocimiento que se obtiene en los distintos niveles de gobernanza, desde lo local hasta lo regional. Siguiente, por favor. En esa línea, Costa Rica ha logrado innovar de manera importante a la hora de declarar de interés público la localización de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Comprendemos que es importante implementar los ODS a los ámbitos locales, municipales y regionales, como podemos ver en pantalla. Siguiente. Otro elemento importante también se encuentra, next please. Otro elemento importante se encuentra, bueno, ¿cuál es el rol que también juega a la hora de formular los informes nacionales voluntarios? Estos distintos niveles de gobernanza pública. En esta línea, si bien el Poder Ejecutivo es quien se encarga a partir de la Secretaría Técnica de los ODS en formular los informes nacionales voluntarios, encontramos tres actores elementales y que encuentran un abordaje importante en esta línea, como lo son la Unión Nacional de Gobiernos Locales, el Instituto de Fomento y Asesoría Municipal y la Asociación Nacional de Alcaldías e Intendencias. Entonces, también podemos encontrar cómo es importante que exista ese liderazgo desde el Poder Ejecutivo para poder garantizar una vinculación entre lo nacional y lo local o regional. Siguiente, por favor. Importante también comprender la necesidad de diseñar estrategias puntuales, ¿verdad? En Costa Rica tenemos lo que se conoce como la red de cantones promotores de los ODS, donde a partir de una alianza entre una de estas instituciones de carácter local y regional, como lo es el Instituto de Fomento y Asesoría Municipal, el Mideplan como el Poder Ejecutivo y el Sistema de Naciones Unidas en Costa Rica, logramos integrar una estrategia conocida como la Red de Cantones Promotores. En esa línea, siguiente por favor, podemos encontrar y ver los resultados donde podemos tener en esta red más de 45 municipalidades, cerca del 50% de gobiernos locales que existen en Costa Rica. Siguiente, por favor. Entonces, bueno, esto se ve plasmado principalmente en los primeros 6 informes locales voluntarios, ¿verdad? En esa línea, desde el Poder Ejecutivo comprendemos la necesidad de lograr integrar estos 6 informes locales voluntarios dentro del Informe Nacional Voluntario que está por presentar Costa Rica ante las Naciones Unidas el próximo año en el Foro Político de Alto Nivel. Entonces podemos encontrar como esta relación e importancia de cómo lograr integrar el abordaje que logran realizar los gobiernos locales a partir de los informes nacionales voluntarios dentro de los informes nacionales voluntarios. Un elemento sumamente importante es que sea una relación recíproca, ¿verdad? Que si bien el accionar del gobierno alimente también estos informes locales voluntarios, estos informes locales voluntarios, por otro lado, también logren alimentar el reporte que se hace como país en la implementación de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. Siguiente, por favor. En esta línea podemos encontrar distintos retos. Uno de ellos es, bueno, lograr integrar cada vez a más municipalidades dentro de esta red, ¿verdad? Que se logren integrar dentro de una estrategia de implementación y promoción de los ODS liderada por el Poder Ejecutivo, pero que también comprendiendo que cada territorio tiene sus particularidades, bueno, lograr integrarlo y lograr, bueno, gestionar esta implementación en los distintos niveles y dentro de los distintos marcos de gobernanza de los ODS. Otros se encuentran en promover también la rendición de cuentas, ¿verdad? Ya tenemos 6 informes locales voluntarios, pero bueno, es importante ampliar este abordaje. Y por último, bueno, es también lograr fortalecer la participación. Comprendemos que existe una representación de los distintos niveles de gobernanza que se tiene en Costa Rica dentro del marco de gobernanza de los ODS, que es liderado por el Poder Ejecutivo, pero es importante cada vez más fortalecer y potenciar esta participación de manera que podamos generar alianzas y sobre todo reflejarlas dentro de los informes nacionales voluntarios y los informes locales voluntarios. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dodier, for bringing this experience of Costa Rica. 2 points I want to mention from your presentation. First of all, is the legal framework and national framework require, for enabling participation of all levels and all actors. That is very important. And the second point you mentioned, I think, comes from the introductory remark of colleagues, is the fact that SDGs are monitoring the public goods. It's not only, dedicated to one level of governance. I think those are some elements we can take, forward on this conversation. And the second speakers will be Marin Kidiraliva, Chief Specialist, International Cooperation and Protocol Department, Bishkek City Government of Kyrgyzstan. Marin will ask you a question of sharing the challenge you are facing on this voluntary local review system, and what are the strategy of overcoming, those challenges. So you can share with us moving forward. You have 5 minutes to make your point, Marin. Back to you.
Thank you, Amar. Greetings from Bishkek. Glad to connect and share experience of voluntary national and local reviews in the Kyrgyz Republic and the city of Bishkek accordingly. Our country has committed to implementing the SDGs, and in this regard, the city of Bishkek began the very first step in this direction with the development of the smart and sustainable city profile, thanks to the support of the UNICE. We have carried out work on data collection and preparation of relevant recommendations. This experience is useful for the VLR preparation. We also followed the actions of our colleagues at the national level. The Kyrgyz Republic presented the first voluntary national review in 2020. It was at times of pandemics. That's why our country presented it online during the high-level political forum. Colleagues at the national level have involved all stakeholders, as many as possible, for the VNR preparation. These are local authorities, business, civil society, academia, youth, people with disabilities, and others. Following the experience of our colleagues, we are also currently assembling the composition of the working group at the local level, taking into account the principle to leave no one behind. Our country will submit the second voluntary national review in 2025. If in 2020, the Minister of Economy and Commerce was the working body for its preparation, now it is the Institute for Economic Policy Research. Unfortunately, this time, local government bodies were not included in the composition of this commission. But the issue of coordination is very important, so we asked to include the Bishkek City Mayor's Office too. It is important to note that the national platform for monitoring and reporting indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals has been developed based on the results of the VNR. This platform greatly facilitates the work of both national and local governments. So the city of Bishkek will present the first voluntary local review next year. We have signed a memorandum with UN Habitat. Together with UN Habitat, UNICE, UNDES, and UCLG, we will work in this direction. On July 3rd, 2023, by a decree of the Bishkek City Administration, we created a strategic group, which included the senior management of the municipality, representatives of the city council, and what is very important for us, the Minister of Economy and Commerce. We are in constant contact with colleagues from the Ministry of Economy and Commerce. This is very important in terms of coordination, as they have already passed this path and provide significant support for us in sharing their experience, how to organize well all this work connected with the voluntary reviews. To summarize what was stated earlier, let me know that our country and the city are doing best to work in strong cooperation and partnership to prepare voluntary reviews according to our national and local development plans and budgets. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for this pragmatism and this experience of Kyrgyzstan. I think one point you brought very strongly is the issue of data collection. I think there's a need to stop by a bit on this issue of data collection, because we have the issue of availability of data, but also the standard of data, which is needed to make sure you have qualitative report. But at the same time, in terms of alignment coordination between national statistical offices and the level, collection data, how they can inform each other to avoid duplication, but also make sure we are capturing progress made on the table. I think it's very important. You brought as well an example of conflict and how you overcome the conflict in terms of integrating relevant level, like your cities on the institutions, dealing with the national review. I think is very important. Thank you very much, Miriam. For now, I will give the floor to Yves Zimmerman. Bonjour Yves, c'est un plaisir de vous avoir ici. Donc, my question to you, Yves, from the Strasbourg, experience, is just tell us your experience on connection between VLR, VSR, and VLR, and what are the best practices you can share with this audience today on looking forward, mechanism and solution and accelerating this connection. If you have 5 minutes, à toi.
Yeah. Merci. Bonjour à tous. Thank you. Nice to be here to share with you what we have done until now. But I have to say that we are far behind in France. We are the only city to engage for a VLR. So we hope to be a model for the other city also. But we have done quite a lot since 2018. So I will explain how we will be trying to be the model for other cities. So if you don't mind, I will continue in French. Ici. So, yeah, oui, nous avons en fait beaucoup engagé notre travail sur les revues. Sorry. Nous avons engagé notre travail sur plusieurs aspects avec les ODD, notamment sur les évaluations, pour construire des stratégies, construire des coopérations décentralisées. Nous avons même une direction qui manage sous toute sa direction avec les ODD. Voilà. Et surtout, nous avons travaillé sur les ODD comme un cadre d'évaluation budgétaire. Mais en fait, nous avons donc tiré la conclusion que pour avancer, pour mieux travailler pour la suite, il fallait faire une revue volontaire. C'était un diagnostic indispensable. Donc cette revue, elle est en cours. On y travaille, voilà, pour sans doute pendant 2 ans, et on va y travailler à travers les 4 principes qu'on a dégagés sur notre travail. 4 principes qui font notre pas une méthodologie, mais autour desquels on va essayer d'avancer pour déterminer, pour que cette revue volontaire soit réellement transformative. Bien sûr, dans ces 4 principes, il y a le fait de monitorer pour fonder les décisions sur la preuve, donner sa place surtout à la décision, à la preuve dans les instances de discussion et d'arbitrage. C'est pas évident. Ensuite, nous allons bien sûr dialoguer pour co-construire avec les acteurs du territoire, aligner les différents niveaux de participation, notamment les autorités locales, s'engager, respecter la règle également, bien sûr, parce que nous avons différents cadres d'engagement, des chartes, des pactes, un pacte social, un pacte urbanisme, un pacte pour la démocratie. Tous ces pactes-là seront l'occasion d'engager les citoyens, mais aussi, plus avant, des conventions de financement avec des moyens. Et à travers ces conventions de financement, on peut aussi bien travailler avec non seulement les acteurs économiques du territoire, mais aussi les autorités. N'oublions pas les marchés publics, n'oublions pas le plan local d'urbanisme, qui est un plan qu'on utilise pour fixer la règle. Et à travers ces outils-là, on peut avancer. Donc, ce dialogue est indispensable. Toujours penser, 3e principe, accroître son impact, agir là où c'est possible. Bien sûr, vous connaissez les analyses 360 degrés sur les objectifs, trouver les interdépendances, activer les synergies pour aller plus fort, mais aussi faire des compromis pour lever les freins. Et ça, c'est lever les intérêts qui sont opposés et des moyens insuffisants. C'est ça aussi les freins. 4e principe, on va donner du sens. C'est important, c'est pour ça que je tiens à ces principes, parce que c'est donner du sens pour rassembler les citoyens autour et les acteurs économiques, les acteurs institutionnels autour des valeurs essentielles qui nous rassemblent. Ne laisser personne de côté, c'est le leitmotiv des ODD, mais surtout les droits humains en tant que tels. Les premiers ODD sont les ODD sociaux. Une valeur comme la coopération et pas la compétition. Fonder l'action sur les réalités socio-culturelles du territoire considéré, c'est de plus en plus souhaité et souhaitable. C'est pour ça que l'on va, nous, travailler sur un objectif 18 pour la culture, à la fois pour le monde de la culture, mais aussi pour livrer un récit positif et heureux de l'avenir. Alors, autour de ces principes, derrière, on va faire une revue volontaire locale qui va tenter de répondre à tous les objectifs que se donnent les bonnes revues volontaires locales, qui ont été déterminées par ONU Habitat. Améliorer des données, la participation collective, la planification stratégique, la cohérence multi. Donc c'est pour ça on va travailler en 2 temps. Le premier temps, ça va être un état des lieux cette année et une dynamique de mobilisation du territoire. Et le deuxième temps, ça va être, dans le premier temps, on va faire cette révision des indicateurs et l'analyse budgétaire également. On a la chance d'avoir fait un travail sur l'analyse budgétaire, donc on va pouvoir relier dans l'état des lieux notre situation avec les moyens qui sont affectés à la situation. On a fait un travail d'alignement par rapport à la revue volontaire nationale qui s'est déroulée cette année pour la France, et on va pouvoir mesurer en fait les politiques publiques qui ont une avancée significative, celles où il faut améliorer, et puis on a repéré également celles pour lesquelles il faut des défis importants. Ensuite, la deuxième phase sur les dynamiques collectives d'ici 2025 portera sur 3 points d'entrée qui ont été identifiés notamment par le groupe des experts sur les ODD et surtout sur la montée en compétences des citoyens. C'est pour ça qu'on va utiliser la question du sport, la question de l'égalité de genre, la question de la culture, de l'économie sociale pour travailler la montée en compétences des citoyens, la compétence à aller vers la transformation. Bien sûr, un plan pour le plan économique et puis la question de l'alimentation également qui est une question éminemment transversale. Et dans cette mobilisation, il y aura ce travail sur le mode de gouvernance avec les citoyens et avec les pouvoirs publics. En fait, on a le souhait de lier en fait les 3 éléments, les 3 piliers qui sont la situation du territoire que l'on va partager avec les citoyens. Ensuite, le dialogue citoyen qui lui-même va établir des priorités pour la suite, pour l'agenda 2030. Et ces priorités, on les discutera ensuite avec les autres niveaux de décision et de financement sur notre territoire, que sont le département, la région, l'État et l'Europe, parce que l'Europe, l'Union européenne est sur notre continent un financeur indispensable, incontournable. C'est beaucoup de choses partent de là-bas. Donc, on va essayer d'avoir ce dialogue partenarial à partir des priorités qui ont été établies par les citoyens. Voilà. Et pour ça, c'est vrai que c'est devant nous ce travail. Donc, je suis très heureux de pouvoir partager et entendre vos expériences. Ce travail, on va l'engager d'abord par les données. Ensuite, on va l'engager dans la manière on va partager notre outil d'analyse budgétaire avec la région et avec le département au moins et avec l'État. Ça, c'est en cours. Et à partir de là, on va...
Thank you, Yves. Maybe I will ask you to hold on there because you brought a lot of elements that need reflection, but also to prospect these others. And we'll get back to you, on the Q&A question. Thank you very much for bringing this human rights angle as well on this voluntary local review system, making sure all categories are involved. Sometimes the quality of participation is very important. And I like the approach of Strasbourg of having particular focus on gender and others related to marginal communities, which is quite an innovation from your part in addition to the financial element. So thank you, Yves. Merci beaucoup. So we'll get back to you with questions. So now we'll move to Stella Sasita from Tanzania. We know that there's a lot of discussion and innovative initiative going on in Tanzania. Stella, we really want to share your experience, on how really to make effective, this participation in terms of decision making, but all level, but also what form of multi-level governance system has been established in Tanzania to make easy this connection between different levels on the monitoring and reporting of the SDGs. Stella, you have 5 minutes to bring your perspective. Back to you. Stella, he seems to be mute, huh?
Thank you very much for the time that you have given me. So I will directly share the issues of participation and the system itself. In Tanzania, we work on policies, strategies, vision, and everything that we also integrate from the national to the community level. So I go specifically in planning. We have the national plan, we have a regional plan, we have the local plan, and the community plan. So basically, we normally have this bottom-up approach of planning, in which we start from the community. We have the methodology of planning known as improved O&OD, in which the community highlight their needs, their challenges, which they face within their community by referring the guidelines and the policies and the instruction given from the national, regional, and the local government as the whole. So putting into consideration those issues, they plan their issues or activities, and then the activities go flow to the local government, whereby they integrate it, and then to the regional plan, and then to the national plan, and whereby from there we find the whole plan of the nation, whereby SDGs will be realized even at that level, putting to the community, local, and the regional plan. So that is actually the issue of participation. So we make sure that the community are participated fully, even though it is not that much extent, because as my colleagues has clearly mentioned, the community are heterogeneous, they differ, but that is the issue of participation. And through that, the methodology, people's mindset do change. The methodology of improved O&OD, community has been capacitated. They have now coming to the point of knowing that they are supposed to be engaged. They are supposed to make sure that they plan, they implement, and they monitor their implementation activity, so that whenever they find some challenges, they will reflect and they know how to make it very clear. But in the government system, because whenever these plans come from the community, at the national level, we receive the regional plan, and then we scrutinize to see whether these plans from the community, local level, and at the region, are they addressing policies, visions, or policies of the government? And then from there, after scrutinization, and then we come to the various committee at the national level. So during that planning process is where we can engage, and then we have the system of monitoring the progress quarterly, and reporting the implementation of these plans in a quarterly basis. So from there, we find some weakness and realize some areas of making interventions, so that we can realize the goals and SDG goal as far as it's concerned. Making into consideration that those quarterly and annually reports as some challenges, we really appreciate the effort done by friends Finland to make this a pilot in Mwanza City on a VLR. This actually gives us a clear way on how we can make a report. Of course, my colleagues have mentioned issues of data accuracy, because in the community, sometimes we find that challenge, even in the local, even in the national level. So having this kind of framework of how to monitor the implementation of SDG through voluntary local reviews, it is actually a very important thing that we can apply. But actually to share, that is what we can we do participation, and through a D by D policy in which community has given laws, financial laws, political laws, governance laws, and then participation as far as it's concerned. So they are fully engaged in decision making, in knowing how things we can plan at this particular moment to address the challenges they have at the community, and also put into consideration without diverging on the goals of the nation as a whole. So that's actually the system, and the monitoring is based on a quarterly basis, but luckily we have this VLR, we can scale it, and it has actually a nice thing which we can learn and make sure that we multiply, and it will give us exactly really picture by each SDG implementation. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much, Stella, for sharing the experience of Tanzania on this bottom-up approach. Of course, the role of community is fundamental, and we are here to make sure no one leaving behind, and community has key role to play. Martino, I know we have a time constraint now. I don't know from now, how do you want to proceed? Do you want to take a few questions? But I'm sure there's a very salient point coming from the discussion on the issue of financing, on the issue of responsibility, on the issue of service delivery provision, which is a major, objective of the SDGs, the issue of quality data and inclusion and human rights standards. And now the bottom-up approach, those are some elements which is emerging from this conversation on making this connection possible and smooth. So let me give you back the floor. I mean, if there are any question, maybe you may guide how you want to take those questions, but I'm sure there's a room to continue this conversation beyond this session. So back to you, Martin, and thanks for giving me this opportunity and this honor.
Thanks to you, Mar, for your availability, and indeed the questions, as you mentioned in the chat, please, I will invite all participants to put questions in the chat. We will address them if we have time here today throughout the session. Otherwise, we will continue offline or in other meeting sessions. Thank you, Omar. And without taking too much time in recapping, as you already done, Omar, and thanks to the panelists of the first block, I will pass the floor to Carol Pollack, moderator of our second block on beyond subnational reporting. So how do we use VLR, VSRs, and VNRs to advance on multi-level governance? Carol, the floor is yours to lead us forward.
Thank you so much, Martino, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear participants. We are now turning to this second block of our discussion, which is focused on beyond subnational reporting and how the VNR, VSR, VLR connection can enhance multi-level governance. We are all participating here today because we recognize that local action is necessary in order to achieve the 2030 agenda, and we recognize the power of VNR, VSR, and VLR processes to contribute to advances in all dimensions of SDG implementation. As the Secretary General noted in his 2023 progress report towards the SDGs, they contribute to data innovation, to planning and policy coherence, to project development, and to financing. And in addition to these, and in addition to helping to inform the development of the policy brief that was mentioned by my colleagues during the opening session today, we hope that today's session will provide an opportunity to reflect upon additional critical contribution of the voluntary review process, namely the ways in which they can contribute to or advance multi-level governance, which we know is also necessary for SDG implementation, because implementation requires action by actors and stakeholders at all levels. So our discussion now is going to focus on the critical question, which is going to be addressed by each of our speakers, of how connections between VNR, VSR, VLR processes can be used to enhance multi-level governance, and what are the best practices that can be shared in this regard. We have an excellent panel today, bringing together experiences from our esteemed participants at different levels of government and from multiple regions of the world. I will introduce each speaker just before their remarks, and the dynamics will be as follows. We have about 25 minutes for our panel, as another session will begin just after hours. So I will like to kindly remind each panelist to please limit interventions to 5 minutes. And as a reminder to those who may have joined us after the opening, interpretation is available in Spanish, French, and English. And so you can participate or listen or speak in this event in any of these 3 languages. And so with no further ado, our first speaker Today, for this block, is Ms. Natia Sikaradze. She is head of the Strategic Planning Unit at Administration of the Government of Georgia, where she plays a key role in shaping and implementing the government's strategic direction. And she served previously as the SDGs National Coordinator, where she led the nationalization, implementation, and monitoring process of the SDGs in Georgia. Ms. Sikaradze, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon to everybody. I would like to first express my gratitude to the organizers for very interesting event, and it's my honor to be part of this conference and to share Georgia's experience and to share our approach towards the process of implementation of Agenda 2030 and preparing voluntary national reviews on national as well as on local level. Georgia is a front runner in landing Agenda 2030, and in 2016 we have presented our first voluntary national review of Sustainable Development Goals with the objective to share good faith efforts and mainstreaming the SDG into country strategic documents and objective, and incorporating the SDG into national goals, aligning them with country strategic priorities, and are set considering national context and challenges and opportunities. And first VNR constituted a baseline assessment driven by the government, whereas the second VNR, which was submitted in 2020, focused on whole of government and whole of society follow-up to the measures taken to implement the SDG and impact of actions. Going forward, second VNR should clearly outline the follow-up actions that we are undertaken after preceding reviews, and VNR also better addressed and evaluated interlinkages and capture progress over time. I would like to be more focused on the local level of implementation, local level's role on the implementation of Agenda 2030. And I would say that the involvement of municipalities and local governments is essential for the effective implementation of the Agenda 2030. Although the implementation of the 2030 Agenda is primarily the responsibility of the national central government, the involvement of regional and municipal governments in this process is of crucial importance to ensure a unified approach of society and consideration of local priorities, which should ultimately contribute to this agenda. And the Sustainable Development Goals are an opportunity for each municipality to work together with civil society, with the private sector, citizens, to create a better world together where everyone enjoys to equal access and rights. And in line with the international standards and guidelines, the government of Georgia is determined to mainstream the SDGs in the local self-government. And in 2021, the government of Georgia developed and adopted a localization action plan. And this plan was taking into account international practices and UN guidelines and, of course, country's context. And the implementation of the plan was started by the end of 2021, and at the initial stage we selected 5 pilot municipalities, and then at a later stage we added additional 27 municipalities. And the goal of Georgian government is to cover all municipalities by 2025. Which should contribute to the achieving set targets for 2030. And in parallel of this process, so we're in the process of localization and landing the Agenda 2030 on a local level. But in parallel of this process, we have started this year working on the first, we plan to start working on the first VLR of Georgia, which will be the VLR of Georgia's capital. And we very much hope that this VLR document will be the real document for other cities of Georgia. And we have the plan to have a very transparent and inclusive process during the development of this document, because this VLR is a kind of analysis of SDGs for a specific local context, and very important monitoring tool for the implementation at a city level. And the process of SDG localization starts with the local review, voluntary local review, which allows local authorities to identify their own priorities and to also identify the next steps in the implementation process of 2030 agenda. Reviewing the implementation is not an end outside, but rather a means of accelerate transformation and thus promote reporting correction. The increased number of repeated VNR services is an opportunity for greater focus on post-VNR processes, and it ensures that the implementation process moves forward after delivering it to the high-level political forum, and involving and empowering local communities through the elaboration of VLRs can contribute to more proactive and systematic participation to sustainable development process, and it broadens the information base, bringing people, including the young people or vulnerable groups, closer to decision-making process. And we can say that VLR can be monitoring and reporting tool, but also a process that guides local governance towards sustainable development. And implementation of SDGs lies on adequate multi-level governance. And the Agenda 2030 pushes for going beyond governments as usual in order to reach these SDGs. And implementation of SDGs, I would say, that lies on adequate multi-level governance, and without it, it's almost impossible to talk about these processes. And in our cases, the first VLR will be developed on a systematic, inclusive processes. On a national level, we have the platforms that ensures the inclusiveness of all processes that are related to the SDG implementation and monitoring, and all the processes that are related to its implementation. And on a local level, we are also creating the mechanisms and the platforms for this interaction, platforms that fosters the inclusive process of implementation of SDGs. And in case of VLR development, we will have the same approach. The process of preparing the VLR provides multiple benefits to the
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for highlighting the value that Georgia places on localization, including as an opportunity for local governments to work together with key stakeholders, and your very heavy emphasis on the importance of inclusive approaches to implementing the SDGs, as well as for sharing the example of Georgia's localization action plan, which is a very interesting good practice to be shared, I think. And the view that reviewing implementation is not an end, but a means to acceleration. I'm sorry to cut in, we're just short on time, so I would like to ask everybody to please keep to 5 minutes, and hopefully we'll have some time for discussion later in the program. So thank you very much again, and I now wish to give the floor to Mr. Modu Jonga, who is the CEO and Director of Administration of the Brikama Area Council in the Gambia. which has been engaged in preparing one of the country's first VLRs. The Gambia also presented a VNR at the HLPF last year in 2022. Mr. Jonga, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
I want to, first of all, want to thank the organizers for this opportunity. I also want to acknowledge the support of UNDESA towards our efforts to accelerate the attainment of the SDGs. But also, I want to acknowledge the efforts of the consultants, Mr. Ali Usar, but also the Gambia Association of Local Government Authorities for the coordination throughout the process. For Brikama local government area, we have viewed the VLR process as a tool for transparency and accountability, but also equally we have used it as a tool to track how far we've gone with regards to the attainment of the SDGs. So what we do is that we try to ensure that our plans are derived from the national development plans of the country, and has the first we have learned a lot along the way, and then the key issues that we have learned is that these processes need to have the private sector, you need to have the vulnerable populations, you need to have women participating in the decision making. Now the connection here is that the reviewing process here between the national level and the local level is a process. It's not a single event, and therefore it is important that the lesson learned from the local reviews, are feed into the national review processes, which is very important. But quite often we have challenges that we deal with regards to, the policies not being SDG compliant. We also have the issue of data as well, and then we're working very hard to ensure that we address this. But also as a front runner local government area, we are very much open to see our positive experience with other local government areas in the country, and also to ensure, encourage others to also conduct VLR processes, because that's the only way you can be able to reflect or measure your performance, and you can also about prioritize your SDGs and see, whether actually these are you have the inputs that you need from all the stakeholders, from the private sector, from the youths, from the women. It is a process. It is not a single event, like I said in the beginning. Now, at the level of the country, we have fed the national voluntary process. For the first time in 2021, the 3 councils that are fortunate enough to conduct a voluntary local review process, were invited, to share their experience, so that we can be able to connect and see, where do we need to improve. Now, so that the national voluntary review process can mirror down, can capture, or reflect what happens at the local level. We're also trying to look at the issue of reporting, which is also inadequate, is very, very limited. But we are working hard to ensure that there's adequate reporting on the implementations of the various SDGs, so that these are captured in the review process. So in essence, an adequate multi-level governance is very fundamental or very key to addressing the challenges that are, of course, highlighted in this review processes, in both the voluntary local process reviews and also the national voluntary review process. As a public service provider, we are aware that we need to keep track, but also, like I said earlier on, data is a problem. It has been a challenge, and we are working very hard. And then our position is to ensure that we encourage our colleagues in other local government areas to also conduct similar VLRs, so that we can help to share experience and best practices and seeing how do we move forward to accelerate the attainment of the SDGs, because we're really behind time, but it is important also we raise the awareness of the communities of the SDGs, because most often the awareness levels is very limited. We also need to we're working hard to ensure that the capacity levels, are kind of increased to ensure, local government authorities are able to conduct, voluntary review processes on their own, or of course with support, technical support and financial support from partners. So having said that, I will stop here, and thank you so much once again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jonga, for sharing the experience of Brikama Area Council and the emphasis that you are placing on raising awareness and capacity building in your communities, and of course of having an inclusive process, and for also sharing the example of how the national government and Brikama and the 2 additional local governments that are carrying out VLRs had some consultations together in preparation for the Gambia's voluntary national report last year. Thank you very much for this. I now wish to give the floor to Mr. Julio Saguir, who is currently Secretary for Public Management and Planning and previously Minister of Education for Tucumán province in Argentina. He has also previously served with national government in Argentina as the Vice President of the Federal Council of Public Management. Mr. Saguir, the floor is yours.
Carol, are you hearing me? Hello?
Hello, I did not hear you just now.
Oh, you are not hearing me.
But I do, no, now I hear you.
Okay, thanks, Carol. I want to thank the UN authorities for this invitation, and Carol Pollack especially. The province of Tucumán is, remember that Argentina is a federal country, so we have 3 levels, national, provincial, and municipalities. Tucumán is the smallest province in Argentina, but after the city of Buenos Aires with the highest density. We have 19 municipalities, and we have already written and informed, together with the national government, 3 voluntary reports. Next, please. We have a story that started with the Millennium Development Objectives in 2005. And we started with a strategic plan that allow us to set indicators first. Another important moment was that we started with the social dialogue as suggested by UN in order to establish those, together with civil society, to establish those indicators. In 2016, the governor signed to adapt our plan, our government plan to SDGs. And so in that moment, we started a second moment. Next, please. We have created at this point what we call a provincial system of planning. Not a plan, but a system of planning. We have, this is a public and open page that anybody can enter, you can enter, and you will find first indicators in strategic axis. We have set 45 quantitative goals according to the indicators we have, okay? Not only for the objectives, but for goals. And we have created a strategic matrix that we'll show you in a moment. Those indicators are supported by the provincial statistical system, which we also have related to the SDGs. And we support it also with the with infrastructure for spatial data, okay, that you can see in the left, excuse me, in the right. Maps that support also our planning. Next, please. What's this strategic matrix? See, you can see there that we have related executive plans, laws by the legislature, academic projects to goals, to each goal that we have indicators. So in this regard, we have come to recognize almost 800 executive programs, 1,500 laws, 900 academic projects. So that for each goal, we have recognized and classified different projects by these different actors. So that's the importance for coordination of the work we have done. In that regard, also, you can see in the donut below that a minister, for example, a Ministry of Health, does not only work and has programs for SDG number 3, but also for many others SDGs, because that's the way we have related. We have also worked with 2 municipalities to bring them to the system that we have created and to help them to make not only plan, a municipal plan, but also reports. And we have done something similar with hospitals. The main hospital in the northwest of Argentina has a plan already related to SDGs. Next, please, because I'm running out of time, and that's a problem, I know. Next, please. SDGs have been very important for creating this system of planning. So SDGs have been critical for us for planning in our province, and the national, the voluntary have been critical for monitoring. At the same time, I think that SDGs have been very important for not only planning, but coordinating those policies, not only by so the legislative power and the academic world. In that regard, I really think at this point, and I'm finishing, that SDGs are an extremely important instrument for planning, regardless of what kind of political or ideological position you have in your country, because any of those goals, objectives and goals can be chosen by any country. In that regard, it has been, at least I can speak for our experience, very important for us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saguier. Thank you for sharing these examples of how Tucumán is using its system of planning for both horizontal coherence and also vertical, working with from provincial to municipal level governments, and also in sectors such as with the hospital that you mentioned. These are truly interesting examples indeed. I now wish to give the floor to our next panelist, Mr. Pedro Neves, who is founder and CEO of Global Solutions and who has vast experience in relation to public-private partnerships and has also served as special advisor to the Portuguese Ministry of Cities, Local Development and Regional Development. Mr. Neves, the floor is yours.
Good. Yes, thank you, Carol. the whole process started March 2015 when Tony Bonici challenged me to look for PPPs to achieve the SDGs. And so far we have implemented and we have found over 190 case studies. And so the point of looking for case studies was the base of looking for evidence where VLRs are already existing. If we could go back 2 slides, please. And so when we went to, the next one, thank you. When we went to Japan and we had a lot of case studies in Japan, we had to understand what was happening in Japan. And what we understood is that Japan started the first VLRs along with New York in 2018, and we wanted to understand why. And actually, the SDGs in Japan, the Prime Minister in Japan, he created a headquarters for SDGs, and the Prime Minister is the general manager of the implementation of the SDGs in Japan, and all these ministers are on these headquarters. And so what happened was that this top-down perspective was replied to the cities. And we can go to the next slide now. And so at the cities, what we have in Japan is that the mayors are also created headquarters of to implement the SDGs, and they also have their cabinets implementing the SDGs. What is very important is that the VNR in Japan, we can clearly see that we have to implement SDGs with the cities, and also, and now we can go to the next slide, we have to implement SDGs with the private sector. And this is, we can go to the next slide. And so what we can see is that we have a first generation that is top-down, a second generation that is bottom-up, and now we have what we are calling the third generation. And the third generation is, I would say, multi-level, but also multi-horizontal implementation of SDGs. Once in every city, there is a SDG platform that complements the state budget, the municipal budget, with a pipeline of SDG projects, and the pipeline of SDG projects is being implemented with the civil society and the private sector. This model is now being replicated in Portugal. The VLR of Mafra was presented last week in New York, and we see and we can we advise even to use this third generation of SDG implementation, and therefore a strong articulation between what we want for the country, what we want for the cities, to share this vision with the civil society, to share this vision with the private sector, to generate a pipeline of SDG projects to make sure that we achieve the SDGs in our cities. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Neves, for sharing this very interesting example from Japan and now also from Portugal on both the top-down and bottom-up, and this third generation now of the multi-level and multi-horizontal approaches to SDG implementation, including the pipeline for projects, which I think that many others would also be interested in learning more about. So thank you very much. And I now wish to give the floor to the final panelist for this portion of our discussion, Ms. Anna Bjornsdottir, who is president of the Icelandic Association of Local Authorities. Ms. Bjornsdottir, the floor is now yours.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I'm not the president, I'm the Director of International Affairs. And I recently had a surgery, so my voice is a bit affected. I hope it will serve its purpose. But Iceland is representing its VNR this week in New York. And what I think other countries can learn from Iceland is that the state has from the start acknowledged the important role of municipalities in implementing the SDGs. So the Association of Local Authorities in Iceland has been a full member of the National Steering Group of the SDGs, and therefore it was very natural that I was supposed to be a member of the Icelandic delegation to the high-level meeting, but was not able to attend due to my medical condition. So, and I also want to stress that what we think is the most vital thing to use our subnational review is also to encourage more municipalities to work on the SDGs. We find that there is a bit of a challenge to maintain the political enthusiasm for the SDGs between elections, because we have new people in the councils, and the people that were really dedicated, they go out. So what we need to do is try to make sure that the SDGs are fully integrated into the municipal steering functions. So and indicators are really important in that regard. So I think my voice is almost gone now. So thank you.
Ms. Bjornsdottir, thank you so much for participating with us today, particularly as you are recovering. And thank you so much for sharing the experience of Iceland and your the participation of the Association of Local Authorities in the Steering Committee for the SDGs. This is something that I think at the global level, we see perhaps a growing number of examples, but there is a need for so much more around the world in this regard in terms of the inclusion of associations of local authorities. So thank you very much for sharing that this is happening in Iceland. And the challenge that you have identified is certainly one that we also hear from local governments around the world as well, which is how to retain the commitment to the SDGs in the face of changing administrations. And some local governments have told us that they feel that the VLR is in and of itself a good way to do this, because it creates a roadmap and something for new administrations to work from. So thank you very much. And I would like to thank all of our panelists for this second block this morning. And I will return the floor to Martino.
Thanks a lot, Carol, and thank you to all the panelists, and specifically for their insights on how they are pushing forward, and the connection that also Anna has been made clear, where reporting is something that happens at all levels, and the role of associations, it's quite relevant, and we are going to hear it very soon and in the next session. And I know that some colleagues and participants are already connected. We are closing this session and getting soon into the voluntary subnational review ones. So in order for us to conclude today's multi-level governance session, I'm calling on Mia Alibegovic, Secretary of the Forum of Mayors from UNECE. We have heard about the Forum of Mayors already in the opening, and now waiting for you to tell us more, Mia. Over.
Thank you so much, Martino. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the multi-level governance for SDG localization, connecting VLRs, VSRs, and VNRs events organized within the context of VLR VSR Days. And it is my task to provide some closing remarks. First and foremost, I would like to express my appreciation to the speakers and the panelists for their valuable contribution to this event. My deepest gratitude goes to all who attended and helped to make it such a successful meeting. Let me briefly share with you some key messages coming out of this event. Hearing and learning from panelists has educated me and all of us here on how multi-level governance and multi-stakeholder coordination are key to achieve the SDGs. It is evident that national governments alone will never be able to meet the SDGs. We need to redistribute power and resources both vertically and horizontally to effectively respond to current crises, recover better, and become resilient. We have seen that multi-level governance for SDG localization is progressing, and more real-world practices are being implemented. Nonetheless, there are a few examples of governments that have implemented complete and effective vertical and horizontal integration at all levels and across all policy areas. Moreover, in most countries, the localization of SDG indicators remains a missing component, making it impossible to assess localized SDG progress. So, which is the way forward? To establish a clear commitment, enforcement, and accountability measures, local regional governments should be integrated into national coordinating structures and reporting procedures on the 2030 agenda. To extend the information base, we must invest in the collection and development of disaggregated data at the local level, as well as enhanced collaboration with national statistics agencies. We really have to link voluntary local reviews, subnational reviews, and local governments to the VNR procedures in order to overcome institutional fragmentation in SDG evaluations. We should also strengthen horizontal collaboration at all levels of government, including regional and provincial ones. We need to strengthen public administration's capacity to address the principles and integrated nature of the SDGs. And last but not the least, we have to involve multiple stakeholders through participatory approaches, allowing for the active engagement in forming and influencing sustainable development initiatives and strategies at all stages. I really want to thank you all, and Martino, please, I give back the floor to you.
Thanks a lot, Mia. Thank you for these valuable remarks, which I think summarize some of the key high-level messages that we have received today. And I'll thank you all participants, and as my role of Master of Ceremony, I will close this first session of the VLR VSR Days, going to a 2-minute break, and we'll come back to it. Okay, thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, welcome back to the VLR VSR Days. And for those of you who just joined us, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Very quickly, let me remind you that we have interpretation in French, English, and Spanish at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And for speakers, please, when you speak, kindly use proper headphones and microphones so that the participants and interpreters can hear you more clearly and we can all have a better experience. Quick point, this session is being recorded. So welcome everyone. My name is Ana Calvete Moreno. I am a member of the UCLG World Secretariat, the research team in particular. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the second online session of the 2023 VLR VSR Days that are co-organized by UCLG, UN Habitat, and UNDESA. Quick reminder, the days were launched last week at the HLPF in New York during the LRG Day. It was a wonderful success with great exchanges, joint encouraging and forward-looking thoughts. We just had the first of the 4 thematic sessions that we have organized for today and tomorrow, which we hope will help build the case around the importance of SDG reporting from the bottom up. And the session on multi-level governance and the connection between VLRs, VSRs, and VSRs just finished. It was an amazing experience. And now we are having a dedicated session on voluntary subnational reviews produced in 2023. I will be accompanying you throughout this session on VSRs. After the welcoming words, we'll open up the first block of today's session, which will focus on the main messages and ways forward of 3 of the African and Asian VSRs produced this year. After this block, a second one will introduce some of the most recent VSRs produced in Europe and Latin America also this year. Finally, we'll have some concluding remarks by Ramatu Kassou, Policy and International Relations Advisor at UCLG Africa, and Bernadia Irawati Chandradevi, Secretary General from UCLG ASPAC. So let's get it started. Dear mayors, dear governors, dear secretaries general, dear colleagues of UN Habitat, UNDESA, dear colleagues and partners, we are having exciting months ahead with the HLPF that is happening right now, the SDG Summit in September, and events that go beyond this point. This is the 4th year that UCLG supports VSRs. It's been a joint effort from UCLG and the Capacity and Institutional Building working group. And we have to say that we're really proud to see how the movement is growing, getting stronger and more participatory, and how VSRs are getting more and more recognized broadly around the world. Commitment to localizing the SDGs from the bottom up has consistently been on the rise since 2015, since the agenda was adopted, as shown by the increasing number of local and regional governments that are aligning their plans, their budgets, their strategies, their indicators to the SDGs, that are raising awareness, offering trainings, and what brings us to here today, which is the increasing number of subnational reporting processes undertaken by local governments and their associations, and the increasingly impactful global advocacy of the international municipalist movement. For you to have an idea, between 2020 and 2023, 37 local government associations have conducted voluntary subnational reviews, which analyze the state of SDG localization throughout their countries. These represent the local and territorial realities of approximately 1.4 billion people and 170,000 allergies around the world. This has to be added up to the efforts made by individual cities, regions, provinces throughout their VLR processes. More than 170 local governments from 44 countries have conducted over 240 VLRs since 2016, with some of them producing several VLRs to keep track of the evolution of localization over time. These VLRs represent 579 million people, which is not bad at all. Almost 2 billion people are covered by bottom-up reporting efforts today. So what does it mean for the municipal movement? This means that we're going beyond individual local and regional governments' efforts for the SDGs and even beyond the work of local and regional governments associations to develop VSRs. VLRs and VSRs are now a true global movement led by cities, regions, provinces, associations, clearly from the bottom up, and with ever-growing support from international associations and the international system, and increased recognition from national governments as well. The global movement around VLRs and VSRs is a true community based around localization and built from our shared challenges and the opportunities to accelerate the goals that is brought about by local and regional governments. So enabling us to engage with national governments and building stronger ties with the VNRs. They are political processes, not just tools, processes to expand the outreach of the SDGs, to improve policy making, to make it more participatory. So all in all, be able to provide better public services to our citizens, placing equality at the core, reaching out to the most structurally discriminated populations, and applying a human rights-based approach to all of it. In spite of the good news, I would like to share with you some data that demonstrates that a lot of work still remains to be done. We're acutely aware that only 12 to 15% of the indicators are on track. Progress is too slow, even though local and regional governments have been at the forefront of action. Through the GTF's 7th annual report on SDG localization, which we launched during the Allergy Day at the HLPF last Thursday in New York, we've been able to draw some important conclusions. From 2018 to 2022, local governments' involvement in voluntary national review processes increased from 43 to 48%, but this year it has gone down to 39%. Their participation in the national coordination mechanisms for SDG implementation went from 26% in 2018 to 34% in 2022, only increasing to 35% in 2023. Regional disparities notwithstanding, and knowing how VLRs and VSRs have contributed to this effort, local governments' involvement in national reporting processes and coordination mechanisms for SDG implementation have been rising too slow to achieve the SDGs. And this is critical because the way in which VNRs mention local governments and SDG localization, for example, says a great deal about how the recognition of local government's role. However, we have some inspiring examples that prove that we are doing things right. Zambia's VNR, for example, contains a section written by the Local Government Association that provides an overview of local government's efforts to contribute to SDG implementation. Similarly, the Icelandic Association, we were able to listen to a representative in the previous section. They contributed to national VNR by drafting a section that highlights local government's actions to create local ownership and localize the SDGs. So we have finally gotten the attention of national and international institutions as around localization, as we have been seeing throughout the HLPF. This means that slowly, although perhaps too slowly, we have started to see a greater investment and buy-in into how local governments see service provision as the guarantee to meeting the goals. But there's still, as I was saying, a long way to go. Incrementalism is not enough, and VLRs and VSRs are processes for exponential growth for SDG localization. VLRs and VSRs days need to be an exercise to share, yes, but also to think together how to strengthen this movement, to build the VLR and VSR campaign to support local and regional governments and other stakeholders. They are tools to actually build a better future. So we're looking forward to seeing what we can all build together. Having this said, and because we know we have started a bit late, let us move to the first block of today's session, which will focus on some of the VSRs that have been produced in Africa and Asia Pacific this year. The panel will be moderated by Omar Siddiq, Head of Unit on Sustainable Urban Development at UNESCAP. Omar, pleasure to have you with us.
Good evening, Anna. Good evening, colleagues and dear friends from Bangkok, Thailand. My name is Omar Siddiq, and I lead the technical work on SDG localization at UNESCAP, the Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific, in our Sustainable Urban Development section. And we are strong believers in this role of local and regional policies, and we find it, in this time of multiple interlinked crises, the impacts of those crises are very localized. So we believe that really that policies from member states, from other actors, really can no longer be placed blind. And the VSRs in our region, as Anna was mentioning, in the Asia Pacific region has the lowest number of VSRs, but it's quickly picking up. And I think it's really important to focus on Africa and Asia together in this session, in this block. Why? Because these are the two fastest urbanizing regions in the world. So what happens in these two regions will have global implications in terms of climate, in terms of economic growth, in terms of inequalities, in terms of the level of people that are moving to cities and the natural growth of cities in this region. VSRs for us at UNESCAP are very important tools because you heard Anna say we need to make progress away and from incrementalism and really scale up because we do not have time. 2030 is really now. And for us, voluntary subnational reviews really can be the link between amalgamating and raising the level of ambition of very different localization initiatives, including VLRs at the local level, and help to raise these up to the national level policymaking and have that role for cities very much within the VNR processes. There's no set template for VSRs like other voluntary reports in this region. So you will get a diversity of different processes and approaches, but we have carefully curated some worthwhile examples from Southeast Asia and Eastern Africa for us to delve into today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Mr. Ladsilas Nagindahima. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, or at least not butchering it too poorly. Mr. Nagindima is the Secretary General of the Rwanda Association of Local Government Authorities. Mr. Nagindima, the floor is yours to share with this group some of the innovations and insights from the VSR that you conducted in Rwanda. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omar. I'm Ladsilas Ngendahimana. It is a complicated name somehow, because it is long, and I'm the Secretary General of the Rwanda Association of Local Government Authorities. I have been serving in local government positions for the last 14 years, so I have a big picture of the system in Rwanda, particularly the decentralization system. In our report, we made it clear that this is the first voluntary subnational review, and it was conducted by a consultant with financial support from UCLG and with technical support from UCLG Africa. So we are thankful to our partners, and it was financially supported by different partners, including the European Union and the UN Habitat. So we are much thankful and worked closely with the government and our members, because the members of RARIGA include all the districts and the city of Kigali. And I shall try to cut short the story so that I don't bore you. Our process or the main findings from this voluntary local review in Rwanda, actually we had many findings, but I can summarize them as follows. One is that in Rwanda, because the decentralization policy outlines clearly the responsibilities of different layers of administration, the central government and the local government. So the central government is responsible for policy formulation, resources mobilization, capacity building, monitoring and evaluation. And the local governments are responsible for implementation, recognizing the principle of the local economy and the local autonomy. That is one. Then local governments are recognized as an important stakeholder in achieving the sustainable development goals through their contribution to the national development. Second finding is that the voluntary subnational review process has highlighted the following. One, there is a need to improve awareness and integration of local governments in a sustainable development goals monitoring process. Second, the VSR process highlighted that there is a weak SDGs coordination mechanism at local level, despite the clear operational frameworks and institutional arrangements at central level. The third highlight is that the participation in the SDGs reporting process to increase local government ownership and localization is highly recommended. And the findings we have show that SDGs are fully integrated in Rwanda's Vision 2050 and the National Strategy for Transformation, which is the government program. At local level, we have the district development strategies and the City of Kigali development strategy, and their achievements directly inform the national strategy for transformation, and they translate into sustainable development goals achievements. There are also several local government achievements on SDGs 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17. In short, about the SDG 6, which is about water and sanitation, the VSR has highlighted that access to clean drinking water in Rwanda is at 82.7%, and the target is to achieve 100% by 2024. About SDG 7, that is about energy, currently access to electricity stands at 61%, and the target is to achieve by 2024 is to achieve 100%. About SDG 9, that is about industrialization. In Rwanda, but we have the land use master plan, we have the capital city, we have the satellite cities, we have the secondary cities, and then you have the rural districts. And all secondary cities and the satellite cities, districts have industrial zones, and these industrial zones are operational in both satellite cities and secondary cities. We have 3 satellite cities, and we have 8 secondary cities in addition to the capital city of Kigali. And all these cities have operational industrial zones. About SDG 11, that is about cities and communities. In Rwanda, the VSR has reported different interventions aiming at city cleaning. We have car-free days, we have car-free zones, we have the plastic waste recycling, and we have the integrated development programs, model villages. These are the innovations at local level. About SDG 17, that is about partnerships. Rariga and our local government members, we have partnerships through the local administrative development agency, but also we have local partnerships, particularly with the European Union, with the World Bank, with the ENABED, that is the Belgian cooperation. Rariga has particular partnerships with the German cooperation agency, that is the GIZ. We have cooperation with UCLG, the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. We have VNG, that is the Netherlands Municipalities Association. We have the partnership with UN Habitat, UN Women, ICLEI, UNDP, and we have also initiated the partnerships with UNDESA and our partners in the local government family. As way forward, basing and building on the findings of the VSR, we recommend and we find this as a way forward. 1, capacity building and awareness activities for local governments and ownership of SDGs for well-informed inputs. The second way forward is to revive or to adjust existing SDGs monitoring platforms to accommodate local governments and promote their use. Third, develop an innovative monitoring system at local level to consistently keep tracking SDGs commitments and targets. Fourth, build the capacities of local governments and enhance their role in policy formulation, data generation for effective multi-level collaboration and SDGs. Those are the key findings of the voluntary subnational review in Rwanda, and we thank all the partners who participated, including the government of Rwanda and our development partners. My pleasure, and I submit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary General. Really, I think you took a very practical and very important territorial approach. And I could see that from the way that the VSR in Rwanda looked at not integrated decision-making across different sectoral priorities, but also across different levels of government and governance, and really helped to inform a holistic approach to SDGs in the country with a strong focus on monitoring and evaluation, supported by different actors. And you mentioned also the role of partnerships in that regard. So thank you so much. And this is a really important lesson because VSRs, like other reviews, they are not statutory plans. Subnational governments have many mandated plans they need to implement. So VSRs, along with other voluntary reports, help to be the glue across those different plans to enhance kind of integrated, coherent implementation on the SDGs at different levels. So thank you again. We're going to stay in East Africa for just a little bit longer, but move to Kenya. And it's really my pleasure now to introduce Mr. Ken Ulok, who is the Wildlife and Natural Resource Management Officer of the Council of Governors of Kenya. So Mr. Ulok, you have the floor to share a little bit about the VSR in Kenya. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Omar, and to all the colleagues on the call. My name is Ken Ulok. I'm the technical lead for Sustainable Development Goals at the Council of Governors, but also the lead for Tourism, Wildlife, and Natural Resource Management. So allow me to just give experience from Kenya on our VSR process. So the Council of Governors in Kenya is the umbrella body that brings on together all the 47 county governments. Kenya has a two-tier government comprising the national and 47 county governments, which are the subnational governments. And so the Council of Governors is the national association for all the devolved units. So the VSR process for this year, our main focus was assessing the localization of SDGs in county government. So we aligned our process to the SDGs of focus for this year's high-level political forum. That is SDG number 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17. And the process was guided by a consultant, of course, with support from the UCLG, both international and UCLG Africa. But also it was a very participatory process that involved the technical officers in the counties who really the process, with the consultant just playing the role of coordinating and of course compiling and the reports. So in terms of the VSR main findings and what we look at the main added value, noting that this is the second VSR we are producing. Kenya having produced the first VSR in 2019, 2020. And of course, other than the VSR, we have 5 county governments that have also produced voluntary local reviews. So we are looking at these processes as synergizing with the VSR and the VLR. So we look at the VSR process, it has stimulated commitment from county leadership and raised awareness on the need for acceleration of the SDGs. This is because of the consultative process and the engagement that we had with the county leadership and all the stakeholders at the subnational level. And then the process also facilitated dialogue between various stakeholders, including national government, civil society organizations, private sector, on their role in SDGs localization. Because when we are doing stakeholder analysis in the process, we were also analyzing what is the role of each of these stakeholders, and in such, it stimulated a lot of dialogue. The counties also, we noted that counties have placed emphasis on different goals depending on their priorities, because we focused detailed analysis in 7 counties And of course, this looking at the data and performance of the counties around the indicators around the SDGs of focus. So the VSR noted that each of the counties had made more emphasis to different SDGs depending on their local priorities. And this was evident in terms of resource allocation to support the various SDGs. In terms of the main findings, we noted that the SDGs have been mainstreamed in all the counties, the development policies, laws, plans, and strategies. We have, however, noted that there's still some gap in terms of policies and legislation that will guide further SDGs implementation. We also realized that the counties need to diversify resource mobilization because resource inadequacy was coming out as a major challenge across all the counties. And so counties are looking at various strategies of enhancing their resource base through increasing the on-source revenue, also adopting other approaches like public-private partnership to help them implement the goals. And then the issue of data also came out strongly, the data as a challenge for tracking. And in this, what county governments are doing is we have seen counties doing what they're calling the county statistical abstracts, which provides the detailed data for each of the counties. And then counties have also engaged with the civil society and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics in terms of development of norms and guidelines for citizen-generated data, so that citizen-generated data can also be used to supplement government official data in reporting. In terms of way forward, what we look at the next steps is that we will use the VSR reports to inform county planning, programming, and budgeting with a view to addressing some of the challenges that have been revealed from the report. You note that our counties are just finalizing the next 5-year plans, what you're calling the County Integrated Development Plans. So the report is going to be very handy in terms of enriching the County Integrated Development Plans. Then the report will also be used for policy dialogues because we plan a lot of policy dialogues with national government, sector, and civil society in terms of accelerating SDGs implementation. So the report will be very useful there. And then we look at also disseminating and engagement at disseminating the reports and engaging both at regional and international level, of course, some of which we are now achieving in this forum, so that we can be able to share our story and also learn from stories from other regions. Finally, we look at the report that it will help us to activate the various community structures for localization of SDGs and strengthening engagement with civil society organizations with a view to deepening localization of SDGs at the community level. Kenya has indicated an interest to report next year. That is our third national review. And so we look at this report will form a huge part of the reference document as we develop the VNR report for next year. Otherwise, thank you very much, and I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oloch. I mean, that's really an inspiring presentation. And I really found it quite valuable that along with the solutions, you were really upfront with the gaps around data, around financing, and also provided some very innovative mechanisms to address those. For example, under the data part, you mentioned using citizen-generated data. And I think this is an important role of the VSRs because for those of us that work with national statistical offices and national governments on the VNRs, we know sometimes getting non-official data and statistics into those reports is very challenging, but we don't want to lose the voice of citizen data producers. So I see this as a very clear role of in the VSRs. And also around the financing, highlighting PPPs and blended financing instruments very much in the follow-up. And thank you so much for amplifying the second generation of VSR in Kenya. I think we can all learn a lot from the way that you're advocating for that and already anticipating the next review from Kenya and how it will feed into that. So thank you so much for those insights. Finally, we're going to travel to Southeast Asia, to the Royal Government of Cambodia. And it's my pleasure to now introduce Mr. Pok Sokundara, who is the Secretary General of the National League of Councils of Cambodia, to share with us his insights from a very different context, but maybe with some similarities from the African context that we heard on the VSR. And I believe he has a PowerPoint. So Mr. Secretary General, over to you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Oba, for facilitating this session. As you can see, my name is Pok Sokundara. I'm from the National League, our local council of the Kingdom of Cambodia. Next slide, please. For the VSR process and main finding, let me just to share with you a bit about the process. For the process, we engage the national consultant, and we regularly receive technical assistance from UCLG, Mr. Egado, particularly, and from UCLG ASPA, Mr. Hendra, who we see also. And we also receive financial support funding from UCLG and ICM from the government of Canada. And with this process, we engage the national consultant and we send out the questionnaire to the municipality, to the district government, asking them to fill in the questionnaire. And because the questionnaire is comprehensive and it's a kind of technical, and it's the first time for the municipality or the district government to fill out the questionnaire relating to SDG. So they have to convene the stakeholder, the different departments of the municipality to sit together to fill in the questionnaire. And it takes longer time than expected. For them to fill in the questionnaire. We set out the deadline for returning the questionnaire to my office by the 1st of January, but it takes until mid-February that we can collect all about 80 questionnaire response based from the respondents. So it's time consuming, but it really is participatory, and we are happy with the result of this process. And after we receive the questionnaire based from the respondent, we regularly have a meeting with our colleague I just mentioned here to review the progress, to review the finding or any challenge in the data analysis and review. This is the process, and the main finding. The main finding is that during the VSO, many key development actors at the subnational level were surprised when they were asking about SDG localization, because they did not well aware about the activity relating to SDG. Actually, they implement a lot of activity on SDG, but when we are talking about SDGs specifically, they say they don't know what is the idea of the SDG. They don't even know the term of SDG, but they implement the activity on SDG. This is the something that we think that, or we find that those people at the subnational level need to training and awareness raising on SDG interpretation and localization, and those people express the need for support, guidance, backstop, M&E and technical assistance from the national level, from my office, from the national league or local council, or from development partner. And they prefer to have a fundamental data information in place in their office for their local development planning, like our colleague just said at the beginning, from I think from Rwanda, that they will use this information for local planning, and we would like to use the same information for this process for local planning also. And our member requests our support to implement the SDG, especially SDG 1, SDG 2, and SDG 6. And during this process, we also found that the best practices at the subnational level, at district or municipal level, we found some projects such as Smart City Initiative, the activity relating to provincial capital urbanization, equipping with a waste management system. This is about SDG 1, 3, 6, and 11. The project on green and clean community is about street solar lighting, solid waste management, creation of local job opportunity. And just for your information, before the municipality implement this project about street lighting, the student who return from school late in the evening, they find it difficult to come back home because of darkness or some traffic accident. But when after the city government install the street lighting, then the student, young children returning later from school back home, they found it more safer in terms of traffic accident or any gangster along the street. So it's more convenient for the people in community, especially for street education, children education, sorry. And also the member community, they have opportunity to run their business very late in the evening. Before that, just around 4 or 5 o'clock, they have to close the shop because there is no customer, because it's dark, because there is no people who want to come to their shop. So when after the street lighting installed, they can operate their business until 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. This is about some SDG 1, 3, 7, and 13. And the other project is also about one window service office. This is very important, and our people at the municipal level found it's very convenient because Cambodia has a long history of central government, but now we are trying to reform to do decentralization. That is meant to give authority or responsibility to from central government to the municipal government. And so a lot of services provided by municipal level instead of provided from the central level. So the decentralization is in the process. And this is something is about SDG 1, 5, and 10.
Thank you. If you could just wrap up, please. Yeah.
sorry. And we, for the way forward, sorry. For the way forward, we share this report with the national government and relevant partner at the national level, and also we post the report on our website, UCLG website, and also we disseminate this report at our National Council annual meeting. Yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary General, and really sharing how the VSR in Cambodia has really helped to push for some of these big policy issues around decentralization. And we know that, this 65%, or I think it's actually more, of SDGs targets will not be met unless we empower local and regional stakeholders, that this is really, of course, based on the principle of subsidiarity, but are they provided the 65% in terms of resources needed to fulfill this mandate? So, it's really a multi-level governance and financing and planning discussion. And that's something I got out from all of the presenters today. And just to sum up, and we do need to move on because we are behind schedule, but just to say that one of the key issues that we see from the VSR as well is that, for many of us that work in local and regional policy making, sometimes disparities within countries can be bigger than when you're comparing countries across each other. And I think the VSR provides a very useful platform for us to understand what are some of these disparities taking place within countries at different subnational jurisdictions. We heard a lot about data and evidence and stakeholder engagement, but I also want to reinforce the point around accountability and monitoring. And really the role that VSRs play in tracking advancements, facilitating transparency, so that all levels of government are held accountable to its people. So with that, I'm going to close the session. It was a very quick session, but I think we all learned a lot. And I'm very thankful to our hosts, UCLG ASPAC, UNDESA, UN Habitat, and all the regional commissions. Just to say one final word from SCAP's side, at our 79th commission session earlier this May, we also passed a regional resolution tabled by the government of Malaysia to scale up action on localizing SDGs at both the subnational and local level. So SCAP, along with UN Habitat, UCLG ASPAC, and many other partners, are now gearing up for the next generation of VSRs and VLRs, based on, of course, the Asia-Pacific regional guidelines, which we released in 2020. So we'll share some more information about that perhaps in the chat box later on. And Anna, I give the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you for this wonderful moderation. And yes, looking forward to receiving more information about that. And also thank you to the associations of Rwanda, Kenya, and Cambodia for joining us and for letting us know a bit more about their VSR processes. Thank you. So now let's move on with block 2, in which we will exchange around the European and Latin American VSRs of 2023. Moderator and respondent of this block will be Fiona Littlejohn Carrillo, who is the Associate Economic Affairs Officer at UN ECLAC. Fiona, happy to have you with us. And please, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Anna, and hello, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who is here connected. I wanted to thank the organizers for putting together these days that I find very important. This whole process of not only documenting experiences at local government levels, but sharing them is key in order to be able to upscale the side effects, let's say, of this process of tracking and reporting. These exchanges of best practices are key in continuing to create awareness and promoting that role that these voluntary subnational reviews can hold towards stimulating and driving action and awareness at all levels within countries all the way up to the international level. These processes provide us with solid examples of how to move from frameworks into action. And most importantly, linking these local level actions with global and very big picture objectives and vice versa, as it's in cities and in local settings where we're going to establish whether or not the SDGs are attained or not attained, and to what level we arrive at them, since it's at that local micro level that the big changes can happen. I find that these review processes also help to make sense of the SDGs, as it really kind of forces a process of grounding them and addressing how these action frameworks can become something real in terms of actionable items. So they can also become these powerful instruments in aligning policies that may already exist with the SDGs and identifying these gaps in implementation, which is kind of a key outcome of these processes, in order to be able to then establish baselines and measure this progress as we move forward in time. As Anna mentioned at the start, these processes have been gathering forth and growing very much in complexity. The reports that we're seeing coming out now are very much more all-encompassing, covering increasing numbers of SDGs and including an ever wider range of stakeholders, which is particularly key when we want to see the actual reality of what is happening on the ground, and including actors from all different levels. So in the second block, we're going to travel to Europe and to Latin America. As with the first block, we would like to address important questions of how these processes took place and how they catalyze awareness and can support policymaking for the localizations of SDGs at the national level as well. How can these processes strengthen dialogue and engagement with national governments? What role would you like to see them have versus the role that they're taking on today? So without further ado, let's start in Europe. I'd like to invite Wim Vrijs, President of the Association of Flemish Cities and Municipalities and Mayor of Genk, to take the floor and to tell us a little about the process of elaborating the SDG report of the Flemish provinces, cities and municipalities. Over to you.
Thank you. Very good morning also to you all. It is very nice that we've got the opportunity to tell something about our VSR that we made in Flanders. And if I look to our first question, what was the added value that we've had? What was the process that we did and the main findings? And you can see that on the next slide. I would give 3 examples to tell something about that. And first of all is advocacy. It's something, of course, that we do as an umbrella organization all year long. But we also saw that by making the role and contribution of local governments in the realization of Agenda 2030 more visible and recognized by the federal and Flemish authorities. So that was one of the elements we saw by presenting our VSR. And also the elaboration of our VSR has led to the inclusion of a specific chapter on the role of local governments in the Belgian VNR. The VNR will be presented this week in New York, and we have heard from a lot of people that our specific chapter was one of the best chapters in the VNR, and I think that is because we work together with all the local governments to make it. So we hope that it will also lead to a seat at the table and a stronger involvement of the local governments in the elaboration and implementations of national and international SDG strategies. A second element is motivates and inspires local governments, because what we have seen is that during the elaboration of the VSR, we generated specific SDG data for each of the 300 Flemish municipalities. This information, together with the many opportunities for learning from each other and other throughout the process, has motivated and inspired municipalities to take on an ambitious SDG localization process in their own local policies. And that is for us very important, because we think embedding it in the local policies can make the difference for the future. Last but not least, as added value is, of course, networking. And during the elaboration and after its launch, the VSR has generated a steady flow of exchanges with regards to best practices and success stories. But ladies and gentlemen, I also have to tell you, there were fantastic failures where we have learned from. And also that is important to share with each other. The network that was formed during the elaboration of the VSR has enabled us to inspire local governments and their associations, I think not only in Flanders, but also in other parts of the world. And at the same time has brought also international best practices to the Flemish municipalities. And that's important for us also to learn from other places, from other VSR or even VLRs and elements like that. If I look overall to those main findings, it is, and we can see it when we go on to the second slide, it is not easy for a lot of small municipalities in Flanders to make their own local reviews. And so we think that by making a VSR through the umbrella organization, it helps us really to make the change, because when we started the VSR discussions, how Flemish provinces and cities and municipalities deploy the 2030 agenda as a strategic and moral framework for their policies, and also that gives an understanding of the achievements of the 17 SDGs through an extensive data analysis of more than 200 indicators, and also via good practices. That's important to tell them also. And the VSR observes clear progress towards achievement in the SDGs in general. Based upon the data analysis, SDGs 1 on poverty, 8, 9, and 10 show the strongest improvements. One SDG has constantly deteriorated since 2010, and that is SDG 15. You all know them, life on land. And that is mainly due to a constant reduction in open space, paving, and also a reduction in green space in more than 87% of our municipalities. The analysis also registers big difference between cities and municipalities, among others, due to the median income and age structure of the inhabitants, and also the size and localization of the municipality. Cities score significantly lower in terms of poverty, climate, safety, and public services. But on the other hand, bigger cities are also the pioneers in organic agriculture or sustainable food, environmental conscientiousness, and innovation. If I then go to my last slide, at what time is this coming, and how can we use it also for the future? What are the steps ahead that we have? I can see that the VSR that we made comes out at a crucial moment in the Flemish local policy cycle. Local elections will take place next year in October, and currently most municipalities are therefore preparing a context analysis. This is a mandatory document in which local governments analyze their own performances and the changing environment every 6 years, with the local elections as a deadline. So this is an excellent tool for new political teams to ground their policy plans in numbers and measurable trends. The data from our VSR are a very interesting feeding ground for municipalities preparing their context analysis. Based on the VSR, we are able to provide personalized infographics for every municipality that allows them to see at a glance how they score for each SDG and also for each indicator, compared to other municipalities in Flanders, but also compared to the expected pattern of a municipality of their specific size, average income, average age, and so on. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we had a very huge response to the availability of this data. Local authorities are getting to work with it concretely, looking at what strengths and weakness the data shows and what the priorities they want to derive from it. Although data availability in Flanders is very high, we stress in our VSR that there's still a need for better data connections and data accessibilities. Some SDGs 2, 14, 17, and so we need more of a data, but we also need a disaggregation of data according to gender, age, neighborhood. So that would be very interesting to be able to take more targeting action locally. VWSG seeks to continue taking a leading role in this. In addition to the centrally available indicators, we inspire cities and towns with sample indicators that they themselves can monitor locally. Interesting proposals have emerged from our VSR working group with stakeholders, for example, around the share of women in municipal management or energy consumption of municipal buildings. But also, we have asked other governments to use the same indicators so that we speak the same language between the federal, the regional, and the local governments. So we think that's also very important for the intergovernmental work that can be done better. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to end with, let us not forget that the global component of the 2030 agenda is also there. It's not enough to fight poverty, inequality, climate issues, etc., only in one's own municipality. European and international partnerships are necessary to ensure solidarity and international justice and reduce negative spillovers. Local governments can play an exemplary role in this by committing the global policy and decentralized international cooperations. I believe, and we believe from VVSG, that VSRs coordinated by an umbrella organization as ours can really be an example for many regions, countries, and show us that we local governments lead by example. Thank you.
Many thanks for that. I think it was extremely interesting to hear about the process of going from these voluntary subnational review and to be able to feed into the national level review. And I think that is an excellent lesson learned, as I could say, for other countries who are aiming to be able to bridge that gap between the local and the national levels and bringing kind of the much more real, tangible local level actions to the forefront in planning that's taking place and of course in the reporting that's taking place at the global level. You mentioned also how important it was in making the 2030 agenda more visible, and I think that is one of the key it is one of the key side effects of this kind of process, is that oftentimes these big global agendas will just stay very much at that kind of top level of awareness, and bringing it right down and translating into what it means on the ground, I think is key in order to be able to enable and motivate, as you quite rightly mentioned, actions to be taken towards achieving this ambitious agenda. Particularly interesting how the Flanders exercise results in these generations of massive levels of data. I think that is one of the key challenges, and next we'll be moving across to Latin America. That is a massive challenge in Latin America, is having this kind of disaggregated data at the local level. And when we talk about evidence-based policymaking and taking decisions and developing strategy plans that respond to the local reality, that is very much what we need, a photograph of what exactly is the reality on the ground. How can we learn from our peers within the country and outside the country to be able to move forward, and how do we measure if we move forward without that data? So particularly impressive to hear how you've been able to generate that data and how that data is now of great use to local level authorities. And I think that is something of the best practice that can be greatly greatly beneficial to other countries that are involved in this process. So now let's jump across to Latin America. I think having heard from the Flanders example, we can now talk to the Latin American context, the different challenges, of course, that we encounter in this region, and how these have been addressed. So without further ado, I would like to present Axel Guanaluisa, who is the Director of Continuous Improvement, Innovation and Technology in Manabí province, who is speaking on behalf of CONGOPE, which is the Consortium of Provincial Governments of Ecuador. So now over to you, kindly take the floor.
Buenas tardes y días y noches con todas y con todos. Voy a hacer la exposición en español. Bueno, principalmente mencionar que el informe voluntario que se ha elaborado desde el CONGOPE, que es el Consorcio de Gobiernos Provinciales del Ecuador, que aglutina de alguna manera a 23 provincias del Ecuador, es un esfuerzo que se realiza a través de, como le decía Wim, de alguna manera articular la información y manejar con suficiencia los datos generados a partir de los gobiernos locales que están a nivel subnacional, y de alguna manera cuantificar de manera cualitativa cómo han sido estos avances, ¿no? Y en ese sentido, si podemos dar a la siguiente diapositiva, por favor. En ese sentido, este informe, ¿me confirman si me escuchan, por favor? Sí.
Te escuchamos, te escuchamos.
En este sentido, este informe se constituye como el cuarto informe de su tipo, y que ha venido de alguna manera teniendo una gran relación a la metodología que CGLU ha apoyado al CONGOPE, y que de alguna manera antes de este informe se manejaba de una manera cualitativa, ¿no? A través de variables categóricas que pretendían dimensionar cuál es el avance alto, medio o bajo de los distintos ODS en los territorios. En ese sentido, este periodo, la idea fue dar un paso más en la metodología, y se añadió con el apoyo de la prefectura de Manabí, y también con CGLU y el en Ecuador, una metodología mixta, que además de agrupar lo cualitativo, pretendía tener en consideración los aspectos cuantitativos de la metodología para de alguna manera ir dimensionando qué hemos hecho y qué es lo que falta por hacer. Y en ese sentido, pues de alguna manera se analizó y se aterrizó a las competencias que las prefecturas tienen. Si bien es cierto, los gobiernos provinciales tienen una gran margen de acción en función de lo que la ley establece, este margen de acción no, digamos, no ataca las 169 metas y los 17 ODS, debido a que hay un marco o una submuestra que determina cuáles son las metas y cuáles son los ODS que podemos atacar. Entonces, se analizaron 16 ODS, que son los que más relación tienen con las prefecturas a nivel provincial, y dentro de este análisis se logró este año tener una revisión mixta de las 23 prefecturas en el ámbito de las competencias, que son fomento productivo, ambiente, vialidad y género, y adicionalmente un tema muy interesante que mencionaban los colegas en sus anteriores exposiciones, se trató de manera igual cuantitativa identificar cuáles son las brechas que hay en los territorios de la provincia, y en función de esas brechas, de alguna manera, dimensionar el aporte que cada ODS puede tener en la gente. Por favor, la siguiente diapositiva. Y en ese sentido, se lograron 3 hallazgos fundamentales. Por un lado, la evaluación de la implementación de los ODS, de pasar de una metodología cualitativa a una metodología mixta, lo cual permitió que las prefecturas tengan una identificación de las brechas, de lo que se ha avanzado y en cuáles, en función de las prioridades y brechas territoriales, falta por hacer. Y además, esto nos ayudó, una suerte de identificar cuál es el grado de utilización de las bases de datos, de la información, del manejo de datos, y de alguna manera tratar de homogeneizarla a un lenguaje común, y que esto nos permita tratar de medir cuantitativamente y tener una relación entre los distintos territorios que hacen el informe voluntario a través del informe que aglutina el consorcio de gobiernos provinciales del Ecuador. Adicionalmente, un hallazgo importante fue la colaboración y el aprendizaje mutuo. Si bien es cierto, este informe aglutina las 23 provincias del Ecuador, también incorpora el apoyo de actores internacionales como CGLU, el apoyo de actores como el PNUD Ecuador, y adicionalmente, de alguna manera, las buenas prácticas que se desarrollaron en otras provincias. En este caso, por ejemplo, la provincia de Manabí, una de las 23 prefecturas que pertenece al CONGOPE, a partir de su informe cuantitativo, de su metodología implementada, fue adherida a este análisis. Y por otro lado, la generación y herramientas para el análisis de información especializada. Es decir, se utilizaron índices de prosperidad territorial, que de alguna manera nos permitían ver cuáles son las brechas, también visualizadores y herramientas para homologar el aporte y tratar de relativizarlo entre las diferentes provincias y prefecturas. Por favor, la siguiente. Y en ese sentido, se llegan a 2 conclusiones importantes. Por un lado, la importancia de la territorialización de los ODS. Si bien es cierto, el mismo nombre, digamos, de las Naciones Unidas, de alguna manera nos invita a que estos informes sean nacionales. Desde el CONGOPE y en especial desde la Prefectura de Manabí, creemos que la territorialización, por la cercanía de la gente, por la cercanía del territorio, es muy importante para que las metas de los ODS se puedan cumplir. Y adicionalmente, analizar que esta visión un poco estatocéntrica que se tiene de la conclusión o la complementación de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible puede ser también parte de los retrocesos que han habido estos años en cuanto a estas consecuciones. Y por otro lado, desde Congope y como actor también la prefectura de Manabí, tratar de que estos conceptos y la importancia de la medición de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y su compromiso sea también acogido por las prefecturas. Si bien es cierto, los principios que subyacen de la Agenda 2030 son principios universales, como poner fin al hambre, erradicar la pobreza, combatir las desigualdades, y se puede decir que hay una agenda antes de la agenda, ¿no? Porque de alguna manera los gobernantes miran estos espacios, estas metas. Pero la Agenda 2030 nos permite homologarnos como prefecturas y desde el territorio, cercanos a la gente, poder ver estas metas, evaluarlas y por tanto identificar cuáles son las alianzas, por ejemplo, necesarias que se pueden utilizar para aprovechar, digamos, nuestro tejido institucional y concretar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. La siguiente, por favor. La siguiente diapositiva, por favor, si me ayudan. Y bueno, en ese sentido se tienen pensado 3 siguientes etapas. Por un lado, la parte internacional, en lo que respecta a las prefecturas lideradas por el CONGOPE, lo que se busca es ir robusteciendo y generando una mejora continua en la metodología de medición e ir homologando las capacidades que tienen los gobiernos provinciales para de alguna manera hablar en un mismo idioma. Por otro lado, los avances, limitaciones que subyacen de la agenda y de los hallazgos obtenidos, de alguna manera es tratar de, con apoyo de entidades o gobiernos que tengan mayor experiencia, adquirirlos para que en estos 7 años que restan de la Agenda 2030, estos informes puedan servir para tomar acción y lograr los objetivos. Por otro lado, desde el punto de vista nacional, la idea es integrarse a los instrumentos de planificación nacional y que de alguna manera desde abajo hacia arriba se articule y se potencie el rol que el gobierno nacional tiene para también como articulador entre los gobiernos provinciales. Y finalmente, desde lo local, el siguiente paso es homologar los 23 digamos, los 23 informes que de alguna manera resume el CONGOPE y también que esto permita relativizar. Finalmente, que estos informes no solo queden en el escritorio, sino que también permitan que o se orienten a la participación ciudadana para entender conceptos básicos de los ODS y también por qué la alineación de las prefecturas en este caso hacia al nivel, digamos, de la Agenda 2030. Eso sería, compañeros, muchas gracias por su atención. En nombre del prefecto de Manabí, Leonardo Orlando, y también de la prefecta de Pichincha, Paola Pavón, quien preside el Consorcio de Gobiernos Provinciales del Ecuador. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Axel, por esa presentación. Thank you very much. I think it's very interesting to hear how this process has taken place and how the exercise of collecting the information has kind of allowed for this harmonization across the different provinces. And I think that's a key point to touch upon, because these subnational reviews allow for exactly that, gathering information from the local level, but at the same time, in order to be able to put it together in a coherent report of this kind of harmonizing, so we're not comparing apples and oranges, and so that cities can really look to each other, provinces can look to each other for different experiences to learn beyond what they can acquire from kind of the international best practice sharing. There is a lot to be said for the internal sharing of experiences that can take place. Also interesting to hear how you felt that this exercise is important in identifying gaps, of course, and to be able to highlight what impact the implementation of SDGs could have in bridging these gaps. So that's kind of a key outcome of these exercises. I'd like to move on to another Latin American experience to hear from Chile. So here I'd like to invite Rodrigo Arias, who is the International Relations Advisor of the Association of Chilean Municipalities, to speak to us about the process of putting together the subnational review in Chile. Over to you. Muchas gracias y bienvenido.
Muchas gracias, buenos días, hora chilena, buenas tardes para los que están en Europa. Mi nombre es Rodrigo Arias, soy coordinador de asuntos internacionales de la Asociación Chilena de Municipalidades. Como ustedes pueden ver en el logo que está apareciendo en la presentación, estamos cumpliendo 30 años. Les traigo un saludo de parte de nuestra presidenta, la alcaldesa Peñalolén, Carolina Leitao Álvarez Salamanca, y de su directorio. Agradecer en primer lugar a CGLU por todo el apoyo para la realización de este informe. La siguiente lámina. Ante la pregunta, el principal hallazgo que nosotros tenemos, o el valor agregado que le damos a, a la realización del VCR, es la validación ante la Secretaría Técnica de la Agenda 2030 en el Gobierno Nacional, y surgen compromisos de colaboración en difusión e información que ya lo hemos venido desarrollando con el tiempo, y que marca una diferencia a lo que ha sido años anteriores, en que el diálogo entre el Gobierno Nacional y los gobiernos locales y los gobiernos subnacionales no existía. Sí estábamos incorporados nosotros en la gobernanza de la Agenda 2030 y sus ODS, pero ahora ya estamos realizando acciones conjuntas. Hemos tenido la subsecretaria de Desarrollo Social que ha estado exponiendo sobre la política de actualización de la Agenda 2030 en Chile en instancias de formación nuestras que organizamos periódicamente en temporadas, y periódicamente también, eso fue en la escuela pasada de verano, en enero, que realizamos en la ciudad de Viña del Mar. Y el reconocimiento sobre eso mismo, el reconocimiento de la Asociación Chilena de Municipalidades como aliado estratégico es un gran paso, como les decía, respecto a la realidad existente hasta años anteriores, puntualmente hasta el año 2022. La siguiente lámina, por favor. Los hallazgos del informe, bueno, los hallazgos... Quise enfocarme y ser lo más sincero posible con esto, y confirmamos que pese a todos los esfuerzos y espacios de difusión, como los que les mencionaba, aún existe conocimiento y apropiación de la Agenda 2030 en un gran número de los gobiernos locales. Con apoyo de Flagma, con apoyo de CGLU y con apoyo incluso también del Estado Nacional, de CEPAL, del Sistema de Naciones Unidas, puntualmente del Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo del PNUD Chile, hemos realizado muchos espacios de formación y de difusión. Sin embargo, aún es muy grande la cantidad de gobiernos locales, tanto en el nivel político electo como en los técnicos, que desconocen los ODS, su existencia incluso, y también como un instrumento y una herramienta para poder planificar las acciones que se realizan en el territorio. Y algo que tal vez puede sonar incluso peor, es la certeza de que no habrá un estímulo de parte del gobierno nacional para la implementación de los ODS, más allá de las declaraciones de buenas intenciones. Ojo, con esto no estoy emitiendo un juicio, estoy constatando un hecho. No existe un instrumento que sea un apoyo claro para impulsar a los gobiernos locales a que se apropien de la Agenda 2030 y que realicen sus proyectos vinculados a los ODS. Entiendo, por lo que hemos visto en Flagma, que no es una realidad solamente de Chile, sino que es una realidad que opera mucho en la región de Latinoamérica y el Caribe. La próxima lámina, por favor. Los próximos pasos, una vez que sea publicado el informe subnacional voluntario a nivel nacional y o internacional, el lanzamiento y la viralización entre los gobiernos locales asociados, compartir experiencia entre los miembros de Flagma, incorporación de módulos de espacios en espacios de formación de la Asociación Chilena de Municipalidades, y la movilización también interna, y esperamos, por supuesto, contar con el apoyo de CGLU para ello, de poder comenzar a realizar este ejercicio nuevamente el próximo año. ¿Qué vamos a hacer nosotros? Entendiendo cuál es la problemática, entendiendo que existe todavía un vacío o existe un gran desconocimiento por parte de los gobiernos locales, tanto a nivel político como a nivel técnico, de lo que es la Agenda 2030, vamos a seguir en eso, vamos a seguir viralizando el informe, vamos a seguir ocupando espacios, utilizando espacios en los momentos de formación de la Asociación Chilena de Municipalidades, ya sea en talleres, seminarios, en las escuelas de temporada, para poder seguir haciendo esto. Vamos a juntarnos con la gente de Flagma también, a través de su presidencia y su secretario ejecutivo, para poder compartir nuestra experiencia, tal como lo hizo el equipo a cargo del informe de México, donde la doctora Adi Carrera nos transmitió también cuál había sido toda su experiencia en la elaboración de ese tremendo documento que realizaron ellos el año pasado, y eso, y empezar a movernos para poder replicar esta iniciativa el próximo año. Así que traté de ser lo más breve posible, teníamos 2 o 3 minutos para hablar, así que espero haya sido satisfactoria mi presentación. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a ti, Rodrigo. Many thanks for that very frank recounting of the picture of where we're at and kind of challenges moving forward. I think what you point to is a key issue at a global level. The fact that the 2030 agenda has stayed very much at a top level in many countries and in many contexts, and so this lack of awareness of the agenda, lack of dissemination, let's say, is a challenge in achieving it. And I think this exercise, as you mentioned, of trying to constantly speak about it, disseminate the information and bring it down to that local level is what's going to make the difference moving forward. As you mentioned, that at the national level, there is not really a strategy to push the implementation forwards. This exercise of bringing it down to a local level can very much make a massive difference moving forward. So I think it's been interesting to be able to listen to these experiences from Latin America, from Flanders, from Europe, and create these spaces to share experiences, and hope that more cities and more subnational reviews take place in the years to come, to try and increase this notion of the more we talk about it, the more positive outcomes we can see. With that, I'd just like to remind ECLAC here. I work with the Human Settlements Unit, and we're very much focused on supporting countries and cities in localizing and carrying out policy-making decisions based on evidence, based on the reality and the local sub-regional realities of each context. So without further ado, I think we're just running over time. So Anna, I'll pass the floor back to you, and thank you very much for the space. Thank you to the speakers, and I look forward to listening more of what's to come.
Thank you, Fiona, for the wonderful moderation, and colleagues for the presentations. This has been very rich exchanges. So thank you for contributing to bringing the VSR movement forward. We hope participants have been able to grasp the importance of the VSR processes together with the VLRs, and are encouraged themselves, or they can encourage their associations to engage in such rich and crucial processes. This is particularly if the national governments are reporting to next year HLPF, but not only, because, well, we know that monitoring, reporting, improving policy making, engaging with other governments and stakeholders is critical and urgent at all levels. Of course, the three co-organizing institutions are here to support and contribute to disseminating your efforts. Time is almost up, though, so for this reason, I would like to move now to the concluding remarks. I'd like to invite first of all, Ramatuka Sow, Policy and International Relations Advisor at UCLG Africa. And then we'll continue with Bernadia Irawati Chandradewi, who is the Secretary General of UCLG ASPAC. Ramatuka, let's start with you. What are your thoughts about this session?
Merci Anna, merci à tous. Ce débat a été très, très, très fructueux. C'est l'exercice que vous me demandez un peu difficile parce qu'il y a eu beaucoup de choses qui ont été partagées et dites autour des VSR, mais nous pouvons en retenir quelques points qui vont être des acquis, mais aussi des défis. Les acquis que nous avons relevés suite aux discussions et aux deux panels, c'est l'engagement des gouvernements locaux et régionaux dans le processus d'élaboration, de reporting et de mise en œuvre des ODD. Ça, c'est un engagement clair qui est un acquis suite au processus. Le deuxième acquis que nous avons relevé, c'est les partenariats qui ont été renforcés au niveau local avec les gouvernements nationaux, mais aussi avec les partenaires internationaux. Donc ça, c'est aussi une constante dans la présentation. Le troisième acquis que nous avons noté, c'est que l'élaboration des VSR est aujourd'hui un instrument qui facilite le dialogue entre les gouvernements locaux et nationaux, entre les associations et le niveau national. Donc ça, aujourd'hui, c'est une nouvelle narrative que les collectivités apportent sur la mise en œuvre des ODD. Ça, c'est un acquis important. Ce que nous avons aussi retenu, c'est que le processus de VSR a permis, sinon à renforcer les actions au niveau local pour la réalisation des ODD. Toutes les présentations ont mis l'accent sur des ODD, soit l'ensemble des ODD et sous des ODD précis sur l'ODD 6, sur l'ODD 7, sur le partenariat. Donc, il y a une remobilisation des gouvernements locaux pour la réalisation des ODD. Il y a des défis, beaucoup de défis, mais des défis qui augurent de l'engagement et de la volonté de poursuivre le processus. Le premier défi que nous avons relevé, c'est qu'il faut, en tout cas, que ça soit en Afrique ou en Amérique latine, qu'il faut sensibiliser davantage sur les ODD au niveau des associations et au niveau des collectivités. Sensibiliser davantage et renforcer la formation. Le renforcement de capacité est important parce que beaucoup des rapports ont montré que le niveau d'information sur les ODD pouvait être un peu faible. Donc ça, c'est un point partagé. Le deuxième défi, c'est la collecte des données. Que ça soit par une méthodologie qualitative que CGLU a proposé à l'ensemble des acteurs, on se rend compte aujourd'hui que la collecte des données, en tout cas, est vraiment une difficulté au niveau des associations et qu'il faudrait le renforcer ou même être innovant sur comment on doit pouvoir réaliser cette collecte des données. La collecte des données est une chose, mais un deuxième défi, c'est l'harmonisation au niveau local, parce qu'il y a beaucoup d'indicateurs locaux et cette collecte va permettre à harmoniser. Le troisième défi qui est relevé, c'est le reporting au niveau des plateformes. On a vu que le partenariat est un des acquis aujourd'hui dans la réalisation des VSR, un partenariat avec les acteurs. Donc, le reporting aujourd'hui au niveau d'une plateforme doit être amélioré parce que c'est ça qui facilite le travail ou en tout cas qui met en exergue le travail. Donc, il faudrait vraiment améliorer le reporting. L'intégration dans le processus de planification est revenue à plusieurs reprises parce que cet exercice permet effectivement de mettre les ODD au centre de la planification locale, mais aussi au niveau de la planification nationale. Et un des défis, je pense, dans le futur, c'est de faire que les VNR, donc les revues au niveau national, partent des revues au niveau local, des revues au niveau subnational pour arriver réellement à avoir des revues au niveau national qui reflètent la réalité au niveau local. L'autre point de défi qui est pris en charge par rapport à la planification, c'est aussi le financement. Malheureusement, le financement n'est pas tellement pris en compte. Et après les reportings, on se rend compte que, et beaucoup l'ont dit d'ailleurs au sortir de la pandémie, qu'aujourd'hui, les budgets sont réaffectés à la relance et que les ODD, effectivement, la mise en œuvre en souffre. Donc, la planification et les budgets affectés, c'est aussi un des défis à prendre en compte, en tout cas qui est ressorti dans l'ensemble des rapports. C'est ce que certains ont appelé le soutien des villes à davantage localiser, parce que qui dit soutien législatif, c'est-à-dire le renforcement de la décentralisation pour certains, le renforcement des moyens financiers mis en œuvre pour d'autres et le renforcement humain à travers la formation, à travers la sensibilisation, pour rendre l'agenda visible par des actions au niveau local et des actions au niveau national. Et pour finir, il y a un autre point dans le partenariat qui est ressorti et qui est une demande, c'est de renforcer le partenariat à travers la coopération décentralisée. C'est ressorti comme une des leçons parce que renforcer ce partenariat, c'est permettre d'échanger sur les bonnes pratiques, c'est permettre de nous renforcer au même niveau subnational et de renforcer les associations. Donc, en tout cas, Anna, c'est vraiment très ramassé les acquis et les défis présentés dans l'ensemble des propositions que nous avons eues et dans l'ensemble des VSR que nous avons eu à partager cet après-midi avec nos collègues. En tout cas, je vous remercie et je remercie l'ensemble des partenaires ici présents. Merci.
Merci Ramatuka d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. Thanks also for the comprehensive overview of the potentialities of voluntary local and subnational reviews and the challenges that we still encounter along the way. Bernadia, pleasure to have you online. Bernadia is currently in New York, ready for the second week of the High-Level Political Forum. The floor is yours, Bernadia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from New York. Indeed, I just arrived a couple hours ago here. And we have a session here later with the government of Indonesia. This is why I'm also here. And I missed the last week event organized by UCLG and all partners. First, let me congratulate all of you, those who produce VSRs and VLRs. I think it's good to know that the VSRs is not only produced one time, that I also pleased to see that several countries like Kenya and Ecuador produce more than one. I think this is a good sign that there are a lot of benefits of producing VSR. It's not just making it happen like VSR is developed, but there are a lot of impacts that maybe when you design the VSR, you didn't think of the much, value added that you got when the VSRs were developed. Like I heard the presentation from Mayor from Flemings that a lot of benefits came up that maybe many of us didn't expect, like giving motivation, also bring the relationship, better relationship between local and regional governments and central governments, and also advocate the importance of SDGs and SDGs localizations, and certainly this importance of SDGs, importance of local and regional governments and the SDGs localization, and definitely important of engaging with different stakeholders. But maybe we can also think of several aspects here, because we underline the importance of local governments associations, but we also have to see that several countries do not have local government associations. How can these countries that do not have local government association can also produce VSR, and hopefully done by several local governments, and hopefully then there is necessity of creating local government association. So this is something that maybe we can think of, like countries Myanmar, Laos, East Timor. These some examples that we have here in Asia that do not have associations. So I think this is something that maybe we can work together with UCLG to hopefully can motivate those countries to create such kind of associations. Another thing that in Asia Pacific itself, we have been working closely with several partners here. Of course, Omar mentioned about cooperation we have with UNESCAP. We also have cooperation with ADB, and of course, we have a very strong relationship with the UCLG in bringing this important of SDG localizations in the form of development of ESRs and as well as VLR. And what is also nice to see that more and more local governments express interest in building or developing this VLR. In Indonesia itself, we got kind of more than 3 local governments to develop a VLR this year, with support from the central governments, particularly, and of course, we'll be supporting as well. This includes also West Java and Lampung and Jambi, and there are many others that I don't know whether you know those local governments, but anyway, when we look at this, when we compare between those VSRs in 4 countries that have been, that produce this VSR, we see some kind of similarities, but we also see some kind of differences. For the similarities, most of them mention the lack of capacity. I think that's also been mentioned by several speakers here, especially in the integrating SDGs into planning processes, into local development plans. And in some countries, they put as mandatory, but in some countries do not. So we also see the similarities in the form of inadequate resource mobilizations. I think Ramatukan also said that lack of finance, that also pick up from the previous speakers. But some countries come up also in Indonesia, for example, they have SDG as one fund that can be accessed by local government. So a lot of initiatives, a lot of references can be taken from all over the world of the importance of financing. There is also similarities in terms of heavy dependencies on the financial transfer from central to local governments and limited engagement with non-state actors at subnational level. Then there is also insufficient capacity to conduct monitoring evaluation as well as vertical coordination bottlenecks. But we also see some improvement in some other countries. So these platforms should be also useful for all of us to also refer how the other countries can do better in terms of engagement with different non-state actors as well. But there are differences, and local regional government's awareness level is different. Although they understand, they have been implementing SDGs, but they may not know that this is SDGs. And there is also different national coordinations mechanisms in different countries. Then also national SDG strategies are in place, but lack of political will in some extent in some countries. So we have seen these kind of differences. But anyway, let me conclude here by thanking everyone here, especially UCLG and all partners, UN Habitat, UN ESCAPE, and all of you are excellent speakers for sharing what knowledge you have, also what experiences that you have in producing the VSR. And let's see what we can add more in this localization of SDGs. But let me also say that the word that Mayor Gen said, that lead by example. I think this is what we are trying all to do, that we are leading all by examples and walk our talk. This is something that we local regional governments do, in which our constituencies bring trust to us. So anyway, all the best for these sessions. And wish you all the best after this, and have a nice day today. And thank you, and see you later if you are in New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadia. Wonderful words about the importance of local government associations and national, regional, international networks supporting SDG localization efforts. So thank you, everyone, for being with us today, speakers, moderators, or co-organizing institutions, participants to this session. A small reminder before we leave. Tomorrow this continues. The first meeting starting at 1:30 Barcelona time, CEST. It will focus on strengthening data collection and analysis and monitoring systems in the framework of VLR and VSR processes. And at 3:15, also Barcelona time, this will be followed by a session on stakeholder engagement and social inclusion and justice, together with the closing of the 2023 VLR VSR Days. See you all tomorrow.
See you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.